right, Shalom family. I'm trying to make sure signal is on and everything. Prayerfully, everybody can see and hear us all right. Prayerfully so. All right, thank you for being on with us. All righty, let's go ahead and get started. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of mine heart be acceptable in Yahweh's sight. He is our strength and our Redeemer, and it is in His name, which is His authority, that we pray, praise, proclaim, project, and protect today's message. Amen. Hola, mi nombre es Kofi. ¿Cómo está? Bonjour, bebe Kofi, ça va? Ni hao, namaste, osayana kitsuboya, Ohio, I see you. Manut, Wagwan, kamsa, kamsamina, aloha, ciao, ensemble, privet, uh, Habarigani, Aquaba, Madase, Etese, Jambo, Mibini Kofi, and the Franco Katana Wewe, Boker To, Boker Tav, greetings, top of the week to you, salutations, Makwartav, Araya Shan Shalom, Anayin Kwavai, Kohilet to servants of Christ, Mashalam Chi, Tada, to Sadaik at Yachada Sha'al, to Tada, Shema, Zavar at Zara at Yachavu. Shalom, peace, everybody. I am Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant to Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time by being the voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. Thank you for being on with us. We greatly appreciate you. Thank you for everybody who was able to attend yesterday as well for the invite that we had to preach. I only did 20 minutes, but in that 20 minutes, I believe it was all right. I checked out with everybody because I kind of wasn't sure. I kind of rushed through a couple of things, but I was told that the word was fine. So we're going to go with that. Thank you for those who were there. Thank you for those who gave that encouragement. Sometimes we preach the word, and if we be honest, I know we're not supposed to be honest sometimes as preachers, which is weird. But sometimes you might give a word, and you might not know if it was exactly what was needed or everything lined up. So I'm glad that everybody said that the word turned out very well and that everything was all right. And we appreciate you all. Shalom, Achia Cherry. Hopefully all is well with baby boy, and of course, as we said, if there's anything needed, let us know. If we need to talk or anything like that. But welcome to everybody. We're gonna go ahead and get ready to get started. Announcements, real quick. So this is all we'll be doing as far as officially today. So this is all we'll be doing as far as officially today um, for the word. As far as outside of Patreon, other things that we do or teachings, etc. Maybe a live session we kind of randomly drop through or something like that. But as far as live sessions will be for today, tomorrow we'll have early rise Bible study session, and so that's at 6:30 a.m. New York time. Even for those that are new, we've been doing pretty well about making sure that we get in contact with you guys pretty much right away. And we've been adding you guys to the lists and email lists and things of that nature. Prayerfully, persons have updated their information in the questionnaire by now. We're trying to hashtag finish strong and creating this hashtag a safe place so that we can be ready for next year to be for We Be the Nation. Hashtag We Be the Nation. So we are excited about transition, about what Yah has for us, about what He has for us eternally. And thank you to the ministerial staff for getting up early as we always do on Sundays and doing what we do as well. So prayerfully it was a blessing unto you to be part of that. But let's go ahead. So outside of that, coming up for this week, tomorrow evening as well, besides our live sessions, tomorrow evening at 9 p.m. New York time, we'll have our project management meeting. We're back on track for our Mondays. We had our last one on Thursday, so we should be back on track to have project management meeting on tomorrow, 9 p.m. New York time. Kind of just go over certain things, evaluate where we are. Those meetings are very specific, in particular for those who are the laborers, right? We have the harvest is plenteous, so for those that want to put in some work and put their hands to the plow and not look back, we offer you an opportunity to show up and kind of hear what's going on. And then if there's something that you like that's said there, simply just contact us afterwards, and we'll make sure that we can use your gift to help us in all the stuff that we're trying to get done worldwide. Amen. All praise to the Most High. Don't forget on Wednesday, Elder Tamara, it's 8:30 p.m. New York time. We'll be on to give a word. And Thursday Rising Prayer, for those that are new, we do Thursday Rising Prayer every week at 7 a.m. New York time via conference call. So if you can join us for that. And sisters, we're continuing our weekly meeting. So this Friday at 7 p.m. New York time coming up. Women's meeting, from what I heard, it was a great meeting, upbeat, all that stuff. Persons were contacting Elder Maya afterwards, letting her know that things went very well. I saw persons in the text train saying that they really enjoyed. So we're excited about that. And don't forget, brothers, this is going to be our last men's meeting coming up, 7 p.m. New York time this Saturday. So a lot of stuff filled up for this week already, and we'll have our watch party, all that, of course. And please, sisters, don't forget, coming up December 27th is Women in Red. Brothers, we want to support them just like they supported us for Brothers in Black. We want to be there to support them and hear from our sisters and be ready to go. Preachers have been given their assignment. Watch night service will be coming up on December 31st. The music will start at 10 a.m. New York time, and we're excited about that to celebrate what Yahweh has done for us. This is something that is not necessarily biblical, but it is traditional as far as what the Negro has gone through, and so we give honor and praise to the Most High. It's not to be confused with a New Year's service, right? Or New Year's Eve service or New Year's Day service, but it is a watch night service. If you've never partaken in one, feel free to research, or just if you stick around for these live sessions, you'll hear, how that goes and everything. But I'm thankful, I'm grateful, praying for you guys. We are trying to help out as many as possible too, by the way, especially those dealing with heat issues and stuff. As we say all the time, unfortunately this season it's kind of slow for us at SOC financially when things come in as far as donations and things a lot of times. So but thank you to those who are able to give whatever you're able to give. That being said, we're praying for you, and whenever we receive something, some of you are already on the list waiting, right? So once we receive something, such as we have, we give unto thee. Alrighty? All right, okay. I think I did all that. I think we did that well. I think we landed the dismount. Right? So let's go ahead and get started for today. And let's say shalom to everybody. So we're going to go ahead and get ready to reverence the word and get ready into the word for today. All praises to the Most High Yah. So if you're able to rise to your feet in reverence of Yahweh's word, we thank you for doing so in advance, or however you were able to reverence the word. We're thankful for you doing that. In the meantime, let's say shalom and peace to everybody and get ready to get into this dynamic message for his people for today. So how you doing, Sister Dawn? And yes, thank you for being on there with us, and we're glad that you were able to make it. How you doing, Sister Carla? How you doing, Brother Dwayne, Keith, Culture Prospect, Beck, everybody on all platforms, Judith, uh, Deborah, Greta. How we say it? You know how we talk Greta. We don't say T's, we say D's. How you doing? Is it Parkia? Not sure. Or not sure if that's how you pronounce it. Uncle Fine, how you doing? Minister Steven in the house. How you doing? Seth Rams, JTO, Davis Royce, 856-54923. Hopefully you didn't put your phone number up for everybody to see it. How you doing, Corey? How you doing? A1, Quintuple 5, Third Down and 1. Is it Neem TV? Reese, Ricardo, Saint Ashe. I think if that's the same Saint Ashe as before, long time no talk to you, feels like. Hopefully all is well. How you doing, big brother Thomas and Sister Tanya and all the family? Hopefully all are doing well. Once again, como estás, mi hermana? Gracias por tu presencia. Mi hermana Sherry, was it Sherry? Yeah, mi hermana Sherry. I think that's right. Thank y'all for the love. How you doing, Clearwaters? HOG Outreach, Jason and the G. E Angel, 1990. P. Nelson, Eric, Joyce, Digital Disciple, Rebecca, Lynn Hightower, Sister Sylvia in the house. Prayerfully all is going well with you, right? A long time no talk to you. I got to catch up. How you doing, Elder Tamara, Sister Chelsea, and I'm not sure if Brother Chris is on as well, but praying for you all. Tens all around. I missed that. All right, praise y'all. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this word. If I missed anybody on any platform, try to my head, not to my heart. If you're coming on today and you have questions, comments, or concerns, it's not Q&A. That being said, we will do our best to answer as many questions, comments, and concerns as we can, but we have to be focused. We have a little bit more time on Sundays, not because we have Sunday set aside for the day of worship, it's just because we got a little more time. So prayerfully, you'll enjoy the word. How you doing, Elder Anais and Sister Renee? All praises to the Most High for you. Hopefully you and Brother Torino and the family are doing well. I saw the baby girl, or I heard, I wasn't on on the Shabbat school, but I heard baby girl still got the cast on or whatever. But hopefully she's continuing to heal, and baby boy is doing all right with all that energy he's got. And hopefully you guys are doing all right with all that energy they've got. All right, let's go ahead and get into the word. All right, we're going to put our right hand or our Bible or our device in the air. You can just repeat after me. This is my Bible. This is my sword. This will I trust. For Yahshua is Lord. No sword of God shall ever be heard. For this is my Bible. And this is Yah's word. Hashem Yechavach. Aman. Yechavashim, his name is authority. Let it be done unto us. You may be seated to go back to what you're doing in the presence of the Most High. How you doing, Brother Alton? All right. So we're continuing the series that we've been in for a while. This series called Reversing the Curse means revisiting the lie, right? If you don't know what that means in essence, if we're going to reverse the curses, generational curses, curses of Deuteronomy 28, curses of Willie Lynch syndrome, things like that, so much energy. So all these different things that are going on, if we are going to reverse these things, we have to talk about lies that we've been told that stop us from even admitting that we're cursed, right? We have to talk about lies that even stop us from admitting that we're cursed. Therefore, we can't be admitted into the hospital of healing, Yah's hospital, because we won't even admit that we have a sickness. How you doing, Paul? Thank y'all for the love, by the way, right? So, and all the different things, we have to admit that there are lies that have been told and things that we're living by and things that affect worldwide view, right? We worldwide, we reach a lot of persons, and we also hear a lot of things. We see a lot of things through social media. We see a lot of things on television, and we're hearing all these things, but we need to recognize what is Yahweh's will and what is the devil's will, right? What is free will and what we're actually trapped inside of. What is truth and what is lying. We're not talking about your truth, right? If your truth is the truth, then it's not your truth anyways. It's just truth. But persons will be like, speak your truth, talk your, right? But the reality is there's one truth, right? And so we need to even come outside of ourselves to be able to properly see something holistically from all angles to make sure that we get the truth. So in this series, reversing the curse means revisiting the lie. Today we're going to talk about the lost cause. Today we're going to talk about the lost cause. We're going to talk about one of the biggest lies that still cause deception and is used by the left and the right. Is used by the left and the right, right? Is this thing to where the lost cause, which basically, if you know about the lost cause, it goes with manifest destiny, it goes with the white man's burden, it goes with doctrine of discovery, it goes with Darwinism, it goes with eugenics. But basically, with the lost cause rhetoric, it is, if you've heard this before, it is the idea that the South shall rise again. Right? That's kind of, if you heard that, you already know where we're headed, right? But that's basically what the lost cause rhetoric is. And we're going to have to discover a lot of different things, talk about a lot of things that were even shifted as far as what the Bible says to try and make this work in modern society. A lot of pastors who are using lost cause rhetoric. It also feeds different things going on with Zionism, things of that nature, right? The Zionist movement. So we have to know some of the stuff about the lost cause and see what's going on. Matter of fact, for those of you who've been doing the watch party with us, how you doing, Sister Jennifer? How you doing, Sister Tabitha? Thank y'all for the love once again. If you have been doing some of the watch party with us for Birth of a Nation, the 1915 version, the last 2 Saturdays, that is part of the lost cause. So if you watch that with us, we'll mention that today. But if you watch that with us, we'll be watching that until we finish. We've been stopping and starting talking about different things we've been seeing in that movie, right? Which was a movie specifically created to ensure that the KKK would grow and that there would be a movement. And it moved the United States Corporation or the United States of America so much that it was actually shown in the White House to a president. That president told the whole country, go see it. And it allegedly, even though there's a whole lot of evidence that takes us away, but I have to say, just in case somebody tries to say I'm saying something crazy, allegedly, that same president would then, in the White House, swear in and become part of the KKK. And we have to realize KKK, alt-right, all these different things, persons want to call themselves different things, make America great again, what is it now, America first, I can't keep up with it all, but all these different things and all these persons coming out, your Candace Owens, your Nick Fuentes, your Tucker Carlsons, your Fox News setups, your right, the guy who Steve O'Bannon. Am I in the ballpark? Steve O'Bannon, Charles O'Bannon, Steve O'Bannon, something like that. All these persons, they come out of this thing, right? Of the lost cause, right? So, and this is something that's a big fight, because what happens is it splits up. It literally is designed to split up the United States, right? How you doing, brother Rodney? The goal is to cause a split, to cause division. The devil does this very well, and anything that causes division, we should study, right? The devil comes with to steal, kill, and to destroy. He causes division and allows that to happen. He does it through that lens or that prism, right, of division, where he can cause chaos that causes death, right? To steal, kill, and destroy. But Yahweh says that he has come that we would have life and have it what? More abundantly. And I'm sorry, I don't know if I did my clean hands things or not. Apologize. Forgive me, yeah. Gotta get better at that. I've missed it a couple times. Hmm. So so when we have so when we're studying these things and researching and looking at this, we have to be aware of how much this has affected, um, if it's affected the country, persons after the Civil War, when it was ending and stuff, persons ran away and went over to Brazil. That's why the so-called Confederate flag, which is really Confederate Jack, but the Confederate flag is big in Brazil. We forget that obviously chattel slavery was big business, and the persons who were getting just as much shipments as anybody else, if not more than everybody else, was the Caribbean. We forget that just because England didn't have the space to house as many slaves as others, although they had slaves there, they had all their slaves in different areas in their colonies, right? Just like France did, just like Spain did, just like Portugal did, just like Russia did. Well, Russia could house them. Russia had some places too. We forget that we've even been taught that persons. I remember, what was it, last year, everybody was saying, oh, because Putin put out that they know that Christ is black, we need to understand that they never had slavery. It was like, oh, time out, time out, time out. You've never studied Gannibal. Right, like that eradicates all that, right? So there's a lot of things that we need to know, and how much it affects, and how we were scattered by it, right? And how this same thing, the same persons who scattered us before, now that we're coming back together, right? This is Balaam doctrine, something to cause us to stumble, something to cause us as a nation to fall, and for us to not be together, right? So the big argument about this, right? And once again, this is called the lost cause, right? Why the South, which is basically in effect an argument over why the South seceded, right? Why did the Confederacy, which by the way was never officially a nation? I'm going to start there, because this is, even if you are part of the Union, if you're still part of the United States, right, you must recognize that the Confederacy is a group of traitors. Now, so were the persons who started the United States, if we be honest, right? So traitors allow traitors to exist. That's generational curse. How you doing, double OG, triple OG, and thank y'all for the love, right? We want to address them as what they were, because a lot of times we try to go by the romanticized, if the homogenized, romanticized, the and now theologized in certain fashion, reshaping of his story. But these are traitors, right? And these traitors were able to come out of this and use the lost cause to interject themselves and cause Jim Crow, to allow the traitors to run the country, right? If you believe it to be a country, it's actually a corporation, right? I don't know. I probably do, because I'm black, right? We black folk, we dance, right? That's your thought process, right? And how you doing, Dark Desires? But yeah, so we have this interesting thing that goes on to where we don't even admit to who these persons are. For example, right, just to kind of show you the context of what I'm speaking on, we call the persons who came over here Puritans, when really they were criminals that the king wanted to die. He put them on a rickety boat, hoping that the boat would make it, and it had basically almost capsized, and it had started to take on water, a total of 2 times at least before. And these persons were actually, who were put on there, were put on there with other criminals. And at first, they had tried to take the life of two criminals, right? They tried to take the life of the criminals. The criminals ran. The criminals hated others so much. They were so, well, I mean, we could use the term racist, but persons would probably prefer I say bigoted, right? But they were so bigoted, they hated others so much that they didn't want their children to learn their language and to possibly even marry into them. So they came back to the king who wanted them dead and begged that he send them to what you now call the United States, which was considered back then to be a penal colony, just like Australia, just like other places, even India at one point, right? If you don't know what a penal colony is a prison colony, right? Penal, you go there for penalty, to serve the penalty, right? So that's why they were sent. They were sent there, and thank y'all moderators for being on topic. They ready already. Praise y'all. That means we're gonna have some nice numbers when they start doing it that early. That means we're doing pretty well. Praise y'all. So, but they were sent to die. We're taught nowadays that they were pure. They were Puritans. Nobody thought they were pure. Nobody thought that they were, doing Protestantism a favor. Nobody believes it, well, I won't say nobody, but nobody was really up on predestiny the way that they were. That's why they even put in your Bible, change it up. That word predestined, that wasn't even a thing. That wasn't a word. That's not an Israelite mindset. It wasn't in the Greek context. It wasn't in the Latin context at that point, right? But they were sent over with other criminals. And so these persons who were criminals, sent with criminals, married into criminals, right, came over and they began to say this whole thing of manifest destiny, things like that. So now you give some years later and they add a lie and they tell you there's something. You can still go up there and visit this fake thing that they call Plymouth Rock. But there ain't no such thing. Plymouth Rocks is no more real than Pride Rock. Right? If you don't know, Pride Rock is from the Lion King, right? That's the big rock they were on. But Plymouth Rock is no bigger than Pride Rock, right? Nobody's ever mentioned Plymouth Rock. It wasn't mentioned up until somebody, hundreds of years after the fact, right? Or maybe not hundreds, let's say at least 100 years or so, starts all of a sudden, writing a story, a fictitious story, and now all of a sudden, oh yeah, they came and no, there was no such thing as, Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock, I know what Malcolm told us it landed on us, but it couldn't have landed on us because it wasn't there. Right? So, we have all this stuff to where we say, oh, the Puritans, this and that, but all it takes is a little bit of change, a little bit of lie, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and now you can romanticize something. And the reality is that there was nothing to romanticize. These were persons who came over, who were criminal, who hated other persons, who hated anybody that didn't believe like them. They used the opportunity, they used the Bible, changed it up, said that it allows them to be able to complete the white man's burden and the doctrine of discovery and predestination and all this other stuff. And they were able to use that to go ahead and take over a whole bunch of persons and take them out. To where now, you wouldn't know where to find a Wampanoag person. Most of us wouldn't, right? We wouldn't have a clue as to go and find a Wampanoag person, right? We wouldn't even have a clue as to what so-called tribe Squanto or Tisquantum came from, right? Many of us wouldn't even think to see, who was it that was wiped out by George Washington when he famously was on that boat, and you would think he was going over there to fight, but we forget he went over there to commit genocide, and then he fought. It was so much into the mind to off persons that had any kind of Negroid features or any kind of Negroid belief, so to speak, that if they looked like, talked like, acted like, were the same color, it was important that you off them. But we believed these persons to be pure. We lied about George Washington that he never told a lie. Well, literally, the lie, right in front of our faces that he never had a set of ivory dentures. If he did, they would have been his fifth set. But before that, every set of dentures he had were made out of the teeth of his slaves. And he lost his teeth not because of some weird thing or just because, randomly, they do this thing randomly. Persons couldn't exist that long. Everybody died in their 30s and 40s. No, he didn't know, he wouldn't eat properly, or he didn't know how to eat properly. He ate candy all day, lost all his teeth by the time he was 30. Right? Like, these are things that are there. So when we get context correct, we start to see some things moving, right? When we can actually put stuff together, this is one of the things that they hide from you is, they'll tell us, pick up the Bible and execute it and use it today, but then nobody says, well, what are the things that we're using it against? It's as real as Fraggle Rock. Yeah, it's about the same reality. How you doing, Brother Jermaine? Right? So when we speak on these things, we have to realize that persons have changed the game. So what is the main argument about the lost cause? Right? Let's go back to that. The lost cause. What is the main argument concerning the lost cause? The main argument of the lost cause is this, is that the Civil War, specifically in the United States, is really a revolutionary war, but the Civil War, we have to dress it up. So the Civil War, right? And before somebody said, no, the Revolutionary War was George Washington. No, persons down south revolted against persons up north. Okay? That's Revolutionary War, right? Not all revolutionaries win. Right? We love Nat Turner, but he didn't unfortunately he didn't win. Right? So this revolution from down south, right, or what we call the Civil War today, but we've been taught is the Civil War. It must be known as the Civil War, right? Even though there was really nothing civil about it, right? But the Civil War. Um, we've been taught that the Civil War was fought, right? Many persons were. Now they're starting to have to revamp it, but for the longest time, they tried to say, wait, whether you were Democrat, Republican, left, right, et cetera, you were taught that the Civil War was about states' rights. That was the main drive that persons were getting, right? States' rights. It was the rights of the states. And we could say two things could be true to a certain extent because, okay, fine, it's states' rights. But the question is, states' rights to what? Now, this is when we got to dig in a little deeper. Because what were the states fighting for the rights for? Right? What did they states when they seceded? Matter of fact, we're just going to look it up. What did the states say the reasoning was for their succession? Right? Because we don't have to even work that hard. Right? If somebody tells you what they did, Maya Angelou taught me that if somebody tells you who they are, believe them the first time. So we're just gonna believe them. Is that all right? I think that's all right. I think that's righteous, right? And by the way, yes, for those who freak out, and you should, by the way, I thank you if you actually care. I know some of you don't really care. You're just trying to say something that's wrong, but I'll address this one time. I've told you guys this already. I'm probably going to cut it. I think I know how to do it properly. I got to turn off all the electricity and stuff. But the squeaking that you hear is not actually from a smoke detector. Smoke detector is disconnected in this room. All right, it's been going on for years now, and even when I got it kind of taken care of, it's basically extremely old electricity. The smoke detector is not even detected, but the squeak, the way this is designed, there's like something inside the walls. But I basically have to cut the wires. I didn't know how to do it. I still really don't, but I think I've got the gist of it, at least to where I know if I know the correct ones to cut. So when I'm able to get up in there and do all that and make sure I tie everything together properly and stuff, and make sure that there's somebody watching me that knows what they're doing while I'm doing it, it'll be done. Up until then, you'll just have to deal with the squeak, which means at least for the rest of today, you will deal with it. I'm not going to address it anymore. I do appreciate it if you actually care about what's going on. Probably not, though. You're probably just trying to be like, oh, see, that's why you're wrong. You can't even change the smoke detector. How can you tell us about how to live our lives? Which I guess one disproves the other. Kind of foolish, apologetics, but it is what it is. But I won't address it anymore. Thank you, though, if you genuinely care about it. All right, so I'm done. That's it. I'm not saying anything else about it for the rest of the time. So now that we got that out the way, all praises to the Most High, right? I know some came for the word, some came to look for whatever they could to address, right? Right? If it's not my hair, if it's not my color, if it's not that I look like Bob Marley, whatever. If it's not, I don't make enough money. If it's all this stuff or whatever, somebody will find something. So let's go ahead and get into it for today. So, anyways, so we're gonna look at why the southern states, why they said they seceded. Now, this is coming from. You can look this up yourself if you like. I'm literally going to a site, American Battlefield Trust, right? Which here I'll say it 3 times just in case. It's www.battlefields.org. Okay, www.battlefields.org, right? Then probably slash learn um, slash primary sources. But once again, if you type in to your machine, what did the states say the reasoning was for their succession? You probably see American Battlefield Trust come up, and it'll say the Declaration of Causes of Seceding States. Once again, you can go look for this place at www.battlefields.org. Okay, but it's called the Declaration of Causes of Seceding States. So I'm not even going extremely deep. And there's only five. Now, there's more than obviously five states that seceded, so we could do more research. But we're going to just talk about five. Okay? Five. Five states. And why they said, not why I said, why they said. And we've done this a long time ago, but we're going to do it again today. And we're dealing with what? We're dealing with the five states, right? These five states that seceded and why they say they seceded, right? And then we'll get more into the lost cause. Okay? And how you doing, Sister Carla, if I didn't say so already? So we're gonna listen. We're gonna listen to these five states and what they said. They're reading, not what Kofi said, what they said. So when somebody tells me, "Oh, I did," when somebody says the state of Georgia, the state of Mississippi, the state of South Carolina, the state of Texas, the state of Virginia, they did not leave because they were because they were worried about slavery. They were leaving because their rights. Well, okay, fine, cool. Their rights that they wanted to keep and they wanted to fight for was to make sure that really, for real, for the persons who could afford a lot of slaves, because not everybody could, if we be honest, but everybody also too fought for that way of life because we don't want to admit is that the master of all the slaves was also the master of everybody else. It's kind of like Rome. If you don't know, the term emperor, imperare, emperor actually means slave master. So everybody in there right? Their business and everything had to go to the emperor, which means that even if you don't have what the emperor has, you still have to make sure that you live through the influence of the emperor. Is that a truth? Is that a true statement? We just gonna we gonna make sure we put that in there. Is that a true statement? Right? Let those who have ears to hear, let them hear. I'm gonna say it again. Emperor means slave master. I want you to catch this. See, because the person's gonna try to dance around this. Emperor means slave master. So he's the top. He's the head slave master. Everybody in his kingdom, everybody in his republic, right? Everybody in what's considered to be Rome or Europa, etc. Europa, by the way, meaning anything that belongs to Rome. Everybody has to be influenced by him, right? If you go on a flight, everybody got to go through TSA. So just because you can fly doesn't mean you're not influenced by TSA, right? Right? It doesn't matter if you go United, if you go United Emirate. It doesn't matter if you go Delta. It doesn't matter if you go. I don't know all the air. What is it? Um, Forgive me. Y'all know the one where where all our people, they say all our spirit, right? They say all our people be on spirit, all this. It doesn't matter which one you go on. Doesn't matter if you're going to Georgia. Doesn't matter if you're going to Georgia, the country, or Georgia, the country, or the state of the states. Doesn't matter if you're going to Canada. Doesn't matter if you're going to Jamaica. Doesn't matter where you're going. If you got to go through TSA, right, then you're affected by TSA. Okay? That's just the way it works. American Airlines, whatever. It doesn't matter. You got to go through TSA. Okay. If you're going to live in Rome, you got to be affected by the emperor, right? Okay. Well, if you're going to live in the United States Corporation, you got to be affected by it, right? So the persons who really have the power, we always think it's the presidents and stuff like that, but the president is just the head of is the face of the corporation, although the CEO is the owner. The United States is a corporation, and they set the South in that regard to be just like the North. You had a president. He might be the face of it, even though y'all like General Lee more than you like what's his face? I don't even remember the president of the Confederacy, but y'all like General Lee more than him. He came from Missouri and everything. I know all the stuff about him. I'll be forgetting his name because, to be honest, I'm not saying trying to be dismissive, but I don't really rock with slave owners that much. you know, that being said, whatever his name is, I'm forgetting at the moment, is gonna come. Jefferson Davis, right? Right. Personally, didn't care about Jefferson Davis. Y'all like Stonewall Jackson more than you like him, but he was the president. But they're CEOs. See, General Lee, he owned a whole rack of slaves. He owned way more. Matter of fact, a lot of you don't know this. When you go to Arlington Cemetery, I'm gonna show you how big slavery is, right? When you go to Arlington Cemetery, do you know that all of that was General Lee's? If you've ever been and you ever seen a movie with Arlington Cemetery, I think they've had it in movies such as The Rock, back with Sean Connery and all that, and Nicolas Cage in that movie, and they have a scene where Ed, whoever it is, the guy who ends up being the bad guy, who's the general who turns, and then at the end of the day won't actually off the persons, and then there's a mutiny that happens. When you see him at that place with all those graves, that's Arlington Cemetery. When you seen that carving, that stone carving, or the whatever it is, it's not stone, but whatever it is, the of what happened with Iwo Jima and stuff there, that's all Arlington Cemetery. All that belonged to General Lee, on top of what the stuff is. If you guys have been to places, you've seen this probably. If you've ever been to Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's place, you have to have more imagination because he owned 500 acres at least. Right? So the little bit that you guys will see and just think, oh, well, now this is a lot and this is crazy. You haven't even gotten to the gist of it, right? So General Lee is more of the CEO, right? And Jefferson Davis is just the president, right? The president has to get money from his supporters, right? The presidents get money from lobbyists. That's why the lobbyists, right, still make up the law to this day. They have to be at all the meetings in Congress. I want you to recognize how the system works. I know we don't like to hear this, but this is the truth, right? You said let those who hear what you said that hear, but you haven't heard about God. So their God said that it was okay for chattel slavery, right? And Alachem tells us that we should be against anything that is sin. So if you're okay with allowing sin to still exist and ignore it, then you don't care about God anyways. You just want to make yourself God and allow yourself to happen, right? But we should learn about history, because anything in history that so negatively affects us causes us to wallow in generational curses. So if you're saying, because I didn't give you a chapter or verse, which we already did, by the way, but yeah, sometimes you can preach a word and not have to give 7,000 verses, and persons should still know, because sin is sin. So if you have a problem with me talking about sin and you're trying to say, okay, I'm going to separate the Most High from history, then what you're saying is I'm trying to separate the Most High from truth, which is a weird place, right? I would just say, like, that's an odd place to be. So we probably shouldn't do that, right? How you doing, user 611351, etc. Thanks for being a part of the community. How you doing, Vito? Thanks for being a part of the community. So I'm going to speak on what I'm speaking, and you're talking about no mention, but persons use God as a vehicle, their belief in God. Now we worship Alachem, God, or good in Germanic language means you can worship whatever you want, right? And a lot of persons still using these vehicles, right? These vehicles, even money is a vehicle, right? So on your vehicle, where it says "In God We Trust," when you spend that, you spend the slave owner George Washington, you spend the slave owner Thomas Jefferson, you spend the slave owner Abraham Lincoln, you spend the slave right, you spend the slave owner Benjamin Franklin, you spend the slave owner Andrew Jackson, right? I mean, the list goes on. I know I've forgotten a few, right? But these are persons that are on there, and maybe we should say, like, what's going on with that? Maybe we should have a conversation. Maybe we should try to figure out why we're still dealing with these things. You see, and this becomes difficult for persons to go through. They don't like for us to talk about it, but it's the truth. And how you doing, Yasha Mar? Thanks for being on, and thank y'all for the love. Right, the verse, what the verse that I said a while ago. I mean, okay, here's some verses for you, right? We talked about John 10:10, that the enemy come but to steal, kill, and destroy, but he's come that we might have life and have more abundantly, right? I know you're just coming on here. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're just trying to make sure that you have to be correct, right? So that's one that we already did specifically that I named, right? If you want to go over another one when I'm talking about confusion, the Bible tells us that Yah is not the author of chaos nor confusion. If you want to talk about lies, if we say ourselves that we don't have sin and that there has been no sin, right, then we are a liar. We try to make Christ a liar and the truth is not in us. I mean, we can continue to go on and on and on, but your issue is not with the word. Your issue is that somebody's saying we should talk about what happened during chattel slavery, right? And whoever your God is, you should probably square up with him why it is, or her, depending on what you believe. You should probably square up with that person. Why is it that you're having such a tough time with somebody talking about something that affects us all, and how we should make sure that we don't continue that generational curse, right? You don't need to thank me, right? Because it's not something that you're actually worried about. You know what I'm saying? You said you once believed a man took a whirlwind to heaven, but then you grew up and your logic progressed. Okay, sure. And I once believed that persons who would do what you're doing now weren't gaslighting, right? And we're actually stick on topic apologetically and didn't show Dunning-Kruger effect. But I've come to find out that you don't have the ability to use apologetics properly. Because if that's your first thing to hear, and you're not even realizing what we're talking about is chattel slavery, then even in your disbelief in that doesn't mean chattel slavery didn't exist. The two don't matter. So using cognitive dissonance to try and win a point. Right? Y'all came to the right place today if you want that energy. I'm not gonna focus on you too but so much today. But I promise you, you came to the right place. If you're sitting up here thinking like you're gonna say one little thing and somebody's gonna die. Trolls are very whatever, right? But if you'd like to actually listen to what I'm saying, feel free. Because today we're in the middle of a series once again called Reversing the Curse Means Revisiting the Lie, focusing in on what? On the lost cause, right? So regardless of whether you believe somebody went up into a whirlwind, do you believe there's a lost cause? Because there is. How you doing, Jay Rasta? All right. So either way, even if you don't, there's some that are just deciding that they're going to stay on the side of craziness. But that's okay, right? It's like when somebody uses Bible verses and they go, "Oh, well, the Bible says that you should love Christ." Yeah, I'm talking about the law. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, I'm with you. Love Christ, sure. Well, that's all that matters. No, it doesn't, because Christ talks about the law. How do you follow His word and you don't care about what He says? Right? It's the same thing. So if somebody's gonna come up with all this stuff today to keep us away from talking about their real hold, which is they want to uphold racism, white supremacy. But you know, that's really what's going on. But that's okay, right? We see you, and like I said yesterday, Holy Spirit told us we're gonna kill them dead. That spirit, that Sambo spirit, that Squanto spirit, that that fighting against John Brown spirit, we're gonna kill them dead. No wonder it hurts, hit dogs holler. All right, so here we go. The Georgia. These are the reasons, once again, we're going to deal with 5 states to jump off. Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, Texas, Virginia. Right? Uh-oh, here we go. See? The law, it was added, blah, blah. Cool, Jeremiah. Right? You don't care about Romans 3:1-2. This is your boy Paul. You don't care about Romans 3:1-2. You don't care about Romans chapter 10, verse 1. You don't care about Romans chapter 10, verse 5. You don't care about Romans chapter 7 as a whole. You don't care about Romans chapter 11 as a whole, right? That's your boy Paul, who you use, right? Because your whole goal is to take away. But once again, this is persons who don't want to talk about something as simple as, why did the South secede? Okay, Sam, I am. Once again, did the South secede? And did the South have 5 states that told you why they seceded? And did they have that? Did at least 5 of the states? Can we get into that? Of course we can't, because that's not your mindset. Your mindset is, I'm going to go ahead and say why everything he says is foolish. But once again, even in your scientific state, your Darwinistic state, which is very racist, by the way, too, right? Darwin's book, the origin of species by means of natural selection, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. His cousin coming on later, Galton, to make sure eugenics is in place. This is what's happening during this time. He wrote the book in 1859. The lost cause starts when Galton starts writing his stuff, and they use eugenics to go ahead and support their theories, right? But you don't have a proper theorem to go off of. You just have foolishness, right? That's all you got. So let's go to Georgia. Why did Georgia say that they left? We're gonna focus, right? You guys can stay on and be foolish, but I'm gonna focus, all right? Because I tried to give you a little bit of time. You've shown that you're not worthy, and whatever you're doing has been found wanting, right? Get your game up. Get your game up. Get your game up. It's looking kind of sad, kind of pitiful. Get your game up. It ain't doing nothing over here. You ready? All right. So this is what they said. How you doing, Tuckwa? All right. Here we go. So the people of Georgia. This is what Georgia said when they seceded. This is what they wrote, not what I wrote. This is what they wrote. How you doing, Leonard? Right. The people of Georgia, having dissolved their political connection with government of the United States of America, so they dissolved. They said we're done. Right. When they dissolved, what did they say? They said they dissolved, present to their Confederates and the world, the causes which have led to the separation. So they say they're going to start this new thing, and because of the way the world works, it has informed a decision. Next, it says, for the last 10 years, which really, if we be honest, this has been happening even since before 1776, the North versus the South, right? Even if you look at Three-Fifths Compromise, remember Three-Fifths Compromise didn't happen because they believed that so-called black persons were three-fifths of a human being. Three-Fifths Compromise was because you were considered to be 0% of a human being by then. How do we know this? Because the North paid taxes and the South paid taxes. The North was supposed to pay, right? The North was supposed to pay a certain amount, and so was the South, right? They were actually paying equal at that time, rather. And then later on, the North said, well, wait a minute, why are we paying taxes on slaves? And you guys don't pay taxes on slaves. The South's response, once again, we can just look at the South at what they say. The South's response was simple. The South said, hey, we don't have, the South said, we don't count them. The North said, why don't you count them? They said, because they're not people. They're not persons, right? These are N-word males. These are N-word females. This is chattel. Why would you pay taxes on chattel? They said, well, even if you don't consider them to be persons, they're still your property. So if they're property, you should pay a property tax. So the South said, okay, all right. And then out of that, right, and look up with Madison and Monroe and Jefferson and all them working together, right? Look at what they did. And they basically came to a position where, all right, the North, you guys have 40%, basically, roughly 40% of what's America. We as the South, we have roughly what's 60%. Let's come up with a compromise. We'll pay 60% or 3/5 of the taxes. You guys will pay 40% or 2/5 of the taxes. Therefore, you have the 3/5 compromise. So the 3/5 compromise was not due to the fact that they thought you were 3/5 of a human being. The 3/5 compromise was due to the fact that what? That they were paying more on you because they own more of you as property. Which means that when we talk about this rhetoric too, the lost cause rhetoric, a lot of times the so-called Northerners, like, or the so-called left, right, like to say that the right are the only persons that were owning slaves, when the reality is you can't have a 3/5 compromise where you're paying 40% of the taxes if you didn't have any slaves, right? Martin Van Buren, first and only president who English wasn't his main language, right? But first and only president, but born here, but first only president who's and lived up in New York, Massachusetts, somewhere around there. He was a slave owner. Matter of fact, your first 18 presidents are chattel slave owners. That includes Abraham Lincoln as well, who started off as a slave. Right? So it goes deep. But anyways, so here we have, it says, for the last 10 years, we have had numerous and serious causes of complaint against our non-slave holding Confederate states with reference to the subject of African slavery, right? They have endeavored to weaken our security, to disturb our domestic peace and tranquility, and persistently refuse to comply with their express constitutional obligations to us in reference to that property, and by the use of their power in the federal government have striven to deprive us of an equal enjoyment of the common territories of the Republic. So let's go back and read a little bit of this and just break this down. Because they just told you, for the last 10 years, we have had numerous and serious causes of complaint against our non-slave holding Confederate states with reference to the subject of African slavery. So in other words, those places that don't own slaves, they mistreat us places that own slaves. That's what they said. How you doing, Nicole? Thanks for being part of the community. Right? So this is what's being said. Sam, I'm gonna mute you real quick because as much as you want to go ahead and use such language, we don't use it here. Right? So I'm gonna bring you back. If you decide that you're gonna try and just take over the whole thing again, once again, you can feel free to just scroll, right? Or I will just mute you. And if you come on again doing the same thing, since it's a regular thing, we'll just block you. I know you wouldn't care, but this ain't for you. All right. So in this stuff, we have to realize that Georgia is saying our issue is if you go back 10 years, and when did these states start seceding, by the way? 1860. So we can look at 1850 to 1860. How you doing, Brother Joseph? Thanks for being on. If Sister Danielle is on, the babies are on. Hopefully y'all are doing well, right? So they're saying from 1850 to 1860, we've had an issue with states that do not want to own slaves. And we're going to look at the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, by the way. We have to, because this is what they're about to mention to you, right? That they say that they have these rights. So we're going to look at the Declaration of Independence and read through that somewhat too. And then we're also going to take some time out to look at the Constitution of the United States. Or some of you, the Constitution of the United States of America. They're the same document, but looked at two different ways. Right? So let's get ready to do some of that. Right? This is heavy. Because once again, reversing the curse means revisiting the lie. We got to see this lost cause rhetoric. They told you the lost cause rhetoric is there to tell you that, hey, we didn't fight to keep slavery. We fought to make sure that we did what? That we were just protecting our states' rights. But the states' rights to what? But they said they had an issue with the subject of African slavery. Now, we know African slavery is just Negro, African, colored, Native American, one-drop rule, right? We know how this works. Right? We know how this works. Okay? The divided states of America, well, they weren't even, they were divided on the topic of chattel slavery. But once again, we have to recognize too, technically, it wasn't even as much as we want one to exist or the other, right? Because chattel slavery still exists. It's on the books. 13th Amendment allows for it to be on the books, just supposedly not based off of color first or color only, right? So chattel slavery still exists. Even as we've seen up into the 70s and 80s, persons who literally were still living in plantations, persons who had to be rescued in Georgia, 2020, 2021, something like that, persons who just in 2025 had to be rescued from chattel slavery, persons who in 2025 were trying to go over to Haiti and trying to get homeless men to join them to fly over to Haiti, to one of the islands, to chattel slavery over there. So it still exists, and we know obviously there's trafficking. All this stuff is chattel slavery. Right? I mean, I know we want to pretend that it's not, but it is. It still exists. Right? You've been taught a fairy tale. You've been taught chattel slavery is gone. But if you still can put brothers on a place to pick cotton with men on horses to shoot at them if they don't pick it well, what do you call it? If you still can make sure that your license plates are made, right, in a facility where somebody's getting paid pennies, if they're even allowed to see the pennies, what do you call it? right, and we don't like to talk about it, but the Jordans and the Nikes and all, and even the Psyches, all that we be talking about and everything, they're not just made in China, where they have chattel slavery over there too, that the corporations are going ahead and making sure that they support, right? And Apple products and stuff like that, where it is what it is. I got blood on my hand, I guess, to a certain degree, because I didn't know the extent at one point, but any products, really, phone products that you're using, this stuff still exists. We're still in the system, which is why at some point, prayerfully, we'll be able to support our own who separate and actually can make some of these things on our own. That's the goal. We got to get out the system because we're still supporting it, right? If we just keep it a buck, like these things are still being supported. That being said, though, if we right, even if what I was really getting to is if you look in prisons, the Jordans and the Nikes and all that, they're not just made in China. They're made in prison. They're made here. Not everything that you're getting is from overseas. And these private prisons, privately owned, right? Private masters who since you don't think about private versus public, You don't even check into this stuff or look to see. And by the way, some of it's supposed to lawfully be kept away from you because it's private, right? So these private plantations are still making money off of you and off of I and off of, trying to get us in prison so bad that 1/3 of so-called black men are going to be put in prison, whether they've done anything or not, or put in jail at least, whether they've been done anything or not at some point in their life. And others will use 1350 to go ahead and be okay with it. But this is why it becomes okay. Once again, Georgia said what? Georgia told us that they've had issues with the subject of African slavery, and that, watch this, that these northern states, these non-slaveholding states, even though Maryland had slaves and Washington D.C. had slaves and Massachusetts had slaves, right? They're telling you these are non-slaveholding places where chattel slavery still exists, even at that time. So let's not pretend this is something weird for us to say, well, nowadays chattel slavery still exists while they're telling you there's no slaves, because when they're writing this, saying they're non-slaveholding states, these non-slaveholding states own slaves. The fight was never to get rid of chattel slavery. The fight was, should we have capitalism be the main income and chattel slavery flow into be something that flows out of capitalism, or should we have chattel slavery be the main income and have capitalism be something that flows out of chattel slavery? That was the fight, right? It really, so in that sense, we could say, if somebody wants to say it was never over slavery, I mean, to a certain degree, that's not what these states said. But once again, the persons who are really fighting, they're fighting over how to use the slaves, right? And how to enslave, how to marginalize. They're not fighting over who will be free. Is it Hakuna Matata is the name? Okay, how you doing? Thanks for being on. All right, appreciate you. All right, thank y'all for the love. So this is what's really going on. So watch this, and thank you for being on all the different platforms. Laishan Shalom, happy first day of the week. May it be peace upon you in this first day of the week. Be careful out here, especially some of y'all now dealing with negative degrees, negative 27 degrees, negative 5 degrees, all this stuff. Just be careful out there, please. All right. So this is what they say. This is what Georgia said. Georgia said they have endeavored to weaken our security. So to get rid of chattel slavery is what to them? Weaken our security, right? Because the slaves secure us. Okay. All right. What else? To disturb our domestic peace and tranquility. Everybody's at peace here. Why y'all tripping over this chattel slavery thing? Well, you be careful over there, Ramon. Or Ramon, not sure how you pronounce it. Right? Then what else? And persistently refuse to comply with their express constitutional obligations to us in reference to that property. To who? Not to the persons. Remember, we said 3/5 compromise is about how much taxes you should pay on that property. Has nothing to do with you being considered to be 3/5 of a person. A chattel slave is considered to be 0% human. That's why they're your property. Okay? Somebody who's into any kind of slavery, right? Any kind of slavery that exists. The only way that you can make it work is the person is allowed to do whatever you say because they're 0% human, right? They're not even a pet. If they act right, they can be treated like a pet. Good boy, good girl. Go ahead. Oh, you want to go ahead and stay in master's house? You want to go ahead and have a nicer place? You want to go ahead and not be where the other slaves are? Good boy. That attitude still exists today. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Now, since they're saying that they believe it's expressed constitution in the Constitution, now we got to read the Constitution. Because here's a lie. Somebody would hear, see, here's the next line. Somebody would hear me say what Georgia said and say, no, Kofi, you lying. Or no, Georgia, really in essence, because I'm just reading what somebody else said, no, Georgia is wrong. That's not correct. They they weren't fighting. That's not something that was expressed in the Constitution. Okay. Well, let's do a little bit of digging then. Let's just do a little bit of digging. It's not that difficult, right? It's not that difficult for us to do, right? Let's look at the Constitution. You want to read? Let's read the Constitution real quick. You guys ready? We're just gonna do some reading. Okay, here we go. So, we the people of the United States in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility. You see how they're using the word tranquility? So they're saying they disturbed our tranquility, our peace and our tranquility, right? Provide the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. Sounds great. Sounds powerful. Sounds patriotic, right? Question. By law. See, now we got to go into law. This is why we're, according to the Bible, by the way, for the person that was arguing earlier, your Bible says that you should know the law greater than the scribes and the Pharisees. So you can't be out here lawless and not knowing any law. And and our Messiah, your Christ, who you say you worship, he says that you should know the law greater than the scribes and the Pharisees. He says if you teach others to not follow the law and you do not follow the law yourself, you're considered to be the least by kingdom standards. But those in the kingdom who teach the law and teach others to live by it, they are considered to be the greatest. That's what your Messiah says. He says, until heaven and earth pass away, should not one jot or tittle of this law in any wise pass. That's what he said. So most persons, especially Christian nationalists, will never get this because they've been taught to be lawless, right? Because lawlessness is what you go by, especially when you want to say that somebody that's actually a human being is not a human being. Right? So, that makes it pretty easy for me to already see where you're coming from, right? And where your argument's coming from. Thanks for being part of the community. Hakuna Matata, how you doing? Be loved. Right? Thank y'all for sharing the live. Appreciate y'all. You said, isn't that what gangs do as well? If they say you're loyal to me, I'll give you more than the other. So isn't this going on today? Well, yeah, it's still going on because the United States of America is a gang. Now, it's interesting, though, how persons don't talk about the fact that the gangs that they're probably talking about, they actually started off positively. Look up what Crypt actually meant and blood actually meant, and then see what the CIA did to make sure that they were split up and how they now use bourgeoisie and put them. And if you know how bourgeoisie, how it's changed and what it now means, look up what they do through them to make sure that what you think about Bloods and Crips is what it is. You think of Snoop Dogg when you think of a Crip. Or Snoop Dogg Blood. Snoop Dogg is Crip, right? Yeah. So you think of Snoop. Right? You think of Dr. Dre. Dr. Dre was never even in the gang. Right? Most of you have never even been on the streets like that. But let me get back to this real quick. Right? Because persons don't want to talk about how these gangs were infiltrated and were changed, right? Once again, when we think about gangs, nobody wants to talk about the biggest gang, which is the United States. But watch this. It says, we the people. Lawfully speaking, what does the word people mean? When you see the word people, what does that actually mean? It's not plural for person. Because the way words work is you have person, you have person, that's plural, and then you have people. Come on, Sister Jennifer. People means nation. So if we're talking about that, the Constitution, and they're talking about we the people, I have to ask a question then, because we know who voted for George Washington, who got 100% vote, by the way, which we should kind of look at and be like, if anybody else in the world got 100% vote, we wouldn't be saying that that was righteous. So the word people means nation. Question, was a person of color considered to be part of the United States? Did they have voting rights? Did they have the same rights that any other so-called white person would have? See, we don't want to talk about actual law. We know we have something called Black's Law Dictionary, and it's not written because the person was black. It's because his last name was black. He wrote a dictionary, and we've had several editions since. We know how law works. It's the biggest and baddest, the biggest, greatest dictionary. It's out for anybody who's in law. If anybody practices law, they all have this dictionary, right? And we know what people means. People means nation. So if you are part of a nation, fine. According to law today, if you were to go into court and you were consider yourself, or law, if you were put on court and say you were black, say you were colored, say you are African American, right, or even Negro, even though they shouldn't do that with Negro. With that being said, even Negro, by law, they consider you to be an artificial person. You cannot be real and be considered to be Negro, black, colored, African American. It's in the law books. And how is it? Adair? I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Thanks for being on. Right? That's right. They're at ease with our scorn. Psalm 123, verse 3 and 4. That's another verse. There's two more verses for you. Right? But I'm in the book already, I promise you. And by the way, we're coming through the prism of the Most High, which is important too, because when you go through your whole day, you don't shake somebody's hand and go, let me find a verse on why I should shake their hand. Or when you don't shake someone's hand, you don't go, oh yeah, I'm not shaking your hand because I saw the verse that says, let them touch no man suddenly. You have Holy Spirit with you, and you should look through the prism of what you believe. So that's what we're using. Right? We're already in there. How you doing, Sandra? Right? So once again, the word people means nation. If a so-called man of color, if a so-called black person, by the way, were women, not just so-called black women, which weren't considered to be women, right? But even so-called white women, were they part of the nation? Did they have voting rights? Did they have the same rights as men? Are they allowed to have their own bank accounts? If they marry somebody, can they keep things in their own name? I'm just saying, see, so we don't know what these words mean. Right? How you doing, soul man? How you doing, joyful spirit? I don't know if today's gonna be a pick me upper, but we're gonna give you the truth. Right? You see what I'm saying? Right. A Native American, especially because the Declaration of Independence says what? The Declaration of Independence talks about the savage. Also, too, the Constitution talks about bond. The bond. Who is bond? Who is bound? They're talking about chattel slaves back then. Now anybody who's into this birth certificate stuff, you bound too. If you go to jail, you're bound. You pay it, right? There's a bond. You pay your debt to society. Anybody who's in debt is a slave. Anybody that's a slave is in debt. That's how law works. This is why Christ had to allow you to become free. Romans 6:22, because the wages of your sin made you a slave to it. The wages of sin is death, right? The debt you're in makes you a slave to something that to the Satan that causes you to die. But the gift of Elohim is eternal life. That he paid the price for you, because that's what was required for you to pay your debt to the Most High. And since the Most High sent himself, in essence, to pay your debt, then he therefore became your owner, but then wants you to become his child, right? Through becoming his disciple, right? Becoming a master of it, becoming his friend, and then being a fellow heir, which means that whatever Christ has access to, because he went into debt for you, but then also came back and had life, right? And now has all power in his hand. That means that he's out of debt, and therefore debt, right? You're right. Death, where is your sting? Grave, I might be saying it reverse, but I think it's death, where is your sting? Grave, where is your victory? You don't own me anymore, grave. You have no ownership over me, devil. Why? Because I've come out. You see, we're talking about the word. We're talking about the word. That's the prism. So when we think about these things, you have to realize that a lot of us don't know that that's in there. Right? We don't know that the Constitution is written. First of all, we are aware of it. We don't know it. The word "know" to mean to be intimate with something to the point of identifying it. If we're going to proper etymology and going back in the story or the history of that word, that's what to know is to be intimate with something to the point of identifying it. Matter of fact, in the Bible, whenever it says somebody knows something, it means they got married. It means they had sex and they had children, or with the goal of having children. Okay. All right. So this is what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about. So a lot of us are aware that chattel slave owners wrote the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, but we do not know it to the point to where we forget that this was not written for you. You have to become an artificial person to belong to an artificial corporation. 28 USC 3002 15 subsection A tells us that the United States is in fact a corporation. Okay? It's not a country. That's United States law. That's United States code. So the United States themselves tells you that they are not a country. And if you know what a state is, a state or an estate is considered to be a country. And you say, no, somebody has an estate. Well, then, yeah, they have a micronation. That, in essence, that's what they have. Right? If a state is a country, the state of something is the country. When you say even you go into a mental state, you're saying, you're talking about culture, nationality. You don't even recognize what words you're using. You're in a different state. You're in a different culture. That's why our parents would even say stuff to us, or our grandparents would even say stuff to us like, boy, girl, you ain't in your right mind. You're not in your culture. You're not in the state. You're in somebody else's stuff. That's not how we operate. That's why they follow up later on and say something to you, maybe like, I didn't teach you that. Where you learn that from? You know that's not how we operate. They're talking about you taking somebody else's stuff on. Right? Okay. So we know this to be true. We can try to finesse it, finagle it, try to argue, but we know this to be true, right? So in the Declaration of Independence, let's look at the Declaration of Independence real quick, right? Abraham Lincoln would quote this later on, but Thomas Jefferson, once again, cognitive dissonance, double-minded, we would call the Bible, right? You see, it's Bible. We in there. Just because I'm using different lingo doesn't mean that I'm not in there, right? James chapter 1, verse 8, which, by the way, is really even talking about if you petition or you pray to the Most High and you don't do what the word or the law says, well, then guess what? Like, then you're praying to him and you're asking him for something that he's not required to give you. Therefore, your prayers don't go higher than the ceiling. And if you'll pray to him and do that, that's James chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. So if you'll pray to him while not following his word, then you're double-minded and you'll be unstable, not just in prayer, but in all your ways. That's the context. Well, Thomas Jefferson, who, I don't know if I have it here. I'm always switching stuff up and traveling and moving stuff around. Yeah, I don't have it in this bag. I thought I did. But there's a book called the Jefferson Bible, where Thomas Jefferson literally took Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, wrote it out in French, Latin, English, and Greek, and erased all the parts that he didn't like. You know, just like they did with the slave Bible. He went a little deeper, though. Anything that was a miracle, he didn't like miracles, so he got rid of them. Anything where it talked about treating persons with respect and not mistreating slaves, he got rid of that, right? Anything that he could. And then he rewrote it, and he said, this is what he thinks about Christ and what it is. And he gave a little bit of commentary and stuff, too. The same Thomas Jefferson who did that, who him and his father went through and ravaged many women who they didn't think were women, right? He who was doing that while being married to his wife and supposedly being, well, he wouldn't say he was pious, but he was a Mason and thought that he one day would become a god. The same Thomas Jefferson that would die, and at the end, he would say, one of the last things he would say, he said a few things at the end. I think the very last thing he said was that he thought that John Adams would outlive him. And John Adams actually died same day, July 4th, that he died, right? But, and John Adams was speaking about Jefferson same day, right? Both chattel slave owners. But Thomas Jefferson, one of the last things he said was, when I think about the fact that God is just, that's what he said. When I think about the fact that there's a higher power that's just, he said, I'm worried about what will happen to my people. In other words, when I think about what we've done to so-called black persons in the name of Jesus, right? Or in the name of the white man's burden, or in the name of manifest destiny, or what will become the lost cause that we're going to today. He said, when I think about the fact that so-called God is just, he said, I'm worried about what's going to happen when he comes back. You see why we should talk about some of these things? In other words, Thomas Jefferson's on his deathbed admits, I've been working for the Satan my whole life, and now I got to go meet my maker. And my people, right, who are called by my name, by Thomas Jefferson's name, they're going to have to meet him too. And they're going to have a discussion. And there's going to be some things that might be, now this is for y'all to do, not for me, but there might be some things that have to happen in the earth realm, even before he comes back. That's what Thomas Jefferson said. I didn't say that. Thomas Jefferson said. This same Thomas Jefferson, though, he wrote in the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident. The same Thomas Jefferson now, right? The cognitive dissonance, the double-mindedness. All right. The same Thomas Jefferson said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, right? And what did Abraham Lincoln say? Abraham Lincoln came across who was a slave owner as well and said he didn't care what happened to us, and he is us, by the way, because he was Melungeon. If you don't know what Melungeon is, he's so-called white European, he's so-called black native, he's so-called black African, mixed together. He's Melungeon. That's what a Melungeon is, right? He was born. He talks about it, that his father was allowed to abuse him and treat him like a slave. Why? Because he was born a slave. Right? So Abraham Lincoln would come and try to say, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. But Thomas Jefferson, he says, when the course of human events, or when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary. Now, see how this reads. This is what Georgia and Texas and all the other states we're going to go through today, South Carolina, etc. They're going to try to tell you and I, Virginia, they're going to try and tell you and I that this is why they're leaving. And just like the 1915 Birth of a Nation movie we've been watching on the watch party on Saturdays, they're going to try to use this to try and say this is why we've got to fight. We're the ones being treated unfairly. We're the ones that are being, punished. What'd you say? You said you ever noticed how Jefferson Davis and Abraham Lincoln favor, and both born in Kentucky? I have not noticed that. I had to go look at that. I've never thought about that. Not one time. But now it's got one of them things I can't unsee. I gotta see. I gotta look at their picture. I'm not always great at seeing who looks like who, but I kind of see it in my head now. So now, thank you for giving me that rabbit hole. I'm gonna be down for a few weeks. Right? You said what, the same time as Jefferson, who said the N-word blood shall mingle with our blood. All that, brother Dwayne. All that. All right. So watch this. Watch this. Here we go. When in the course of human events it has become necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature, and watch this, the laws of nature and of nature's God. What do you say? I'm just quoting, right? I'm just quoting. And thanks for being part of the community. Come talk sports, right? He said what? The laws of nature, natural law, and nature's God. That means universal law, because you can't have a universe without a single spoken sentence. Uni, one verse sentence. Universe. So in order to know who made the universe, you have to know who spoke it. So he's saying literally, and that, by the way, is true. Right now he's using it, he's finessing it, but he's spitting. He's using it to lie, but he's spitting. Right? That's a bar. Right? When it comes time for us to separate, because we need to have equal station, we should be treated the same, to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, which means that the Most High, when he created all, he said that we should be allowed to be treated like human beings. Right? If I didn't tell you Thomas Jefferson wrote this, and I said Marcus Garvey spoke this, you would say, yeah. Right? If I told you that Christ spoke this, you would say, yeah. Problem is that Thomas Jefferson is using this to go ahead and still allow chattel slavery. He's just talking about we want to go ahead and betray England. We don't want to be English anymore. Matter of fact, we're going to become American. We're going to go on a boat. We're going to off some person so we can get access to the boat. We're going to go ahead and the persons we committed genocide against, we're going to put on black or brown face. We're going to put on their makeup too. We're going to put on the stuff that we scalped off of them, and we're going to run around and go, ooh, 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 ooh. That's right. And we're going to become Americans, although by law, an American is a copper-colored person indigenous to the Americas. All right. Okay. That's what we're doing. But this is what he's saying. He's using it for something different. He said the separate and equal station to which laws of nature and the nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. So wait a minute. So if you have slaves, are they men? Later on, when you guys will say, we the people, are we men? When you'll start to experiment on our women and start doing stuff that they still do to them in OBGYN to this day, and when they're giving birth to this day, having them lay on their back instead of squatting stuff, going inside and reaching inside of them, taking children out and having Margaret Sanger be hailed as some kind of hero, even by the left, right? Even though she literally, and I don't care if you're left or right, I'm kingdom, right? So kingdom is all. whole, right? And his righteousness, all that left and right stuff. You missed me with that. But that being said, Margaret Sanger, you guys lift her up still to this day in Planned Parenthood, forgetting that she literally said that blacks and Jews were a plight and that they'll never get it right and they're having too many babies and that's their problem. But if we get rid of their babies, they'll be better to serve us while simultaneously we'll be better because we won't have to worry about a lot of them being around. That's what Margaret Sanger said. Susan B. Anthony, who asked, would you help black men to vote? She said, I'd rather get my right arm than help any of them Negroes. But today you love them and want to keep lifting them up. No, no. Tell the truth. Shame the devil, even the devil that's in them. He said that all men are created equal. But were we considered to be men? He said everybody is created equal. Would he have, see, this is why I got to defend our women. If he had looked at my wife, he wouldn't have looked at my wife as equal. He would have tried to do something to her. And I would have had to try to kill that man. He wouldn't have looked at my daughter as equal. He would have tried to look at my daughter as somebody he could do something to. I would have had to try to kill that man. Right? He wouldn't have looked at my mother as equal. He would have looked at my mother as somebody tried to do something to. And I would have had to try to kill. I know you want to hear it like that. You think that that's not holy. You think that a pastor's not supposed to talk like that. I'm telling you what it is, because a man that won't defend his family, what value are you? That's who Thomas Jefferson was. Thomas Jefferson, he's just a product of his times. No, he produced the times. Bump that. I'm about to say something else that, forgive me, my flesh got it, but let me calm down. But bump that. Ain't no Auntie Mary. Bump that. No. He wasn't a product of the time. He produced the times. He led the times. What you talking about? And this man had the audacity, and your teachers have the audacity to teach your babies, to teach you. And we have the audacity to force these babies to have to learn this foolishness. Because we believe in the Bible. Stop. Because we don't have the scripture to go with it. Stop. We have that and more. And by the way, in your Bible, Isaiah 53:1 says the same thing that Paul would repeat in Romans chapter 10, verse 16. Who shall believe our report? Because they ain't telling the truth. So if you don't report the truth, then who will? If you don't fight for righteousness, who will? If you don't say that these sisters have the right to say that we have never felt protected because Thomas Jefferson was doing stuff to them back then, if we still trying to tell them, no, we the people includes you. No, it never has. See, but in order to reverse the curse, we have to revisit the lie. Today's lie that we're revisiting is the lost cause. When you see somebody waving that rebel flag, that Confederate Jack, that's what they're doing. They're saying we need to go back to when great old Thomas Jefferson. We're not going to have time to read through this whole thing. I'm just giving you little pieces. Now, look, I told you it's in the Constitution. I told you it's in the Declaration of Independence. If I don't read it to you today, it doesn't mean that this stuff is not in there. Read through it and see if what I'm saying is true. Study so thyself approve. Then bring it before the Most High. And if what it says is true and the Most High approves it, then work what He says, that you can be a workman, His workman, and you won't ever need to be ashamed, right? Because you can rightly divide the word of truth. Right? When you read on, you'll discover that he talks about, right? Thomas Jefferson talks about the savage. Who is the savage? Sauvage, by the way, en français, savage, it means wild. Wild is a way of just saying that you don't belong inside of somebody's society. That you don't deserve to be a citizen. And that's why we're non-citizen nationals anyway. We're not trying to be a citizen. I need you to hear this, right? He's telling you that they have to get rid of the tyranny of the king while he himself is a tyrant. We've got to stop what the king says. How you doing, Sister Casey? All right. Much love and respect to everybody coming on today. All right. And shalom to each and every one of you. He's saying we got to stop the tyrant. King George is the tyrant. Meanwhile, they done let George Washington loose, and he's off and on the Native Americans. King George is the tyrant. Meanwhile, Thomas Jefferson has hundreds of slaves, and he's forcing all the women that he can, because he's a libertine, just like Benjamin Franklin, a libertine means they can't help themselves. The same one who wrote Amazing Grace, he was a libertine. He said he sinned with a high head. In other words, when he was forcing women off the boat to do stuff, he did so, but he did so in a dignified manner. And if you go over to the church that he was part of, that he ministered at, then guess what? You'll still see that his name is up and everything, and his plaque is still up, and he's supported and he's celebrated. Meanwhile, what did he do to our community? And do we even care enough to see what he did? For that cause, it's very rare that you'll ever hear me break into any kind of Amazing Grace to sing it, to play it, whatever. Even if somebody requested at a funeral, I had to tell a person the truth. Hey, you know, I've made exceptions a couple of times, and I had to really, really pray hard about it. The Holy Spirit had to be the one to tell me to do it, because I did not. That song, although I get what the person means, you're not gonna sit up there. We're not gonna pretend that you weren't sitting up there while singing Amazing Grace with the left, with the right, with the right hand. You weren't messing around and forcing women with the left, right? And by the way, we can't pretend that that's something that we have to, that this is where you miss me. For those of you who are about to say, no, you have to compartment, and I compartmentalize a lot, right? I just was invited to something yesterday that I spoke at, and they were saying Jesus, 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 and all that stuff. And hey, if that's where they are and that's where they're in a relationship, hey, I didn't say it, but I came on there and I preached the word, right? I get it. There's times when I'm listening to songs and I recognize somebody about to say Jesus and all that stuff in the song. I get it. I compartmentalize, right? I'm starting to do less of it, to be honest, but I get it. I get it, right? That you compartmentalize that, hey, and you need to be able to reach persons where they are, and I'll never stop trying to reach somebody where they are, right? That being said, right, I also comprehend that I don't get to use that as an excuse to let persons off the hook for stuff that they knew better than, right? Like the guy who wrote Amazing Grace, and he's doing all that stuff, and simultaneously, right? That being said, simultaneously, you can't tell me to do that, but y'all don't want me to listen to R. Kelly, which I don't, by the way. Honestly, he's just not my, you know, to be honest with you, especially certain R. Kelly, do your thing, your thing. It just ain't, they don't move me. Right? No offense. I'm saying he can write songs, he can sing better than what a lot of persons think. I'm just saying it just don't move me. If I could turn back the hands of time, that's more my speed. But I like the original better. Whatever. He got a lot of stuff out, right? I ain't trying to listen to nothing off age, ain't nothing but a number, right? But y'all say you shouldn't listen to R. Kelly, you shouldn't listen to Michael Jackson, but y'all will be the same persons that say Elvis is the king. Hey, wait a minute now. Elvis, who was stealing from us, Elvis, who was messing with underage girls and married one. You want me to listen to Goodness Gracious, Great Balls of Fire? Wait a minute, that dude who had 6 wives, his first or second wife was his own cousin who was like 13, 14 and was messing with her when she was like 11, 12. I'm supposed to lift him up. You want me to lift him? You right? See, now that shows me. Wait a minute. So I can't listen to R. Kelly, and I shouldn't listen to Michael Jackson. And by the way, if we gonna keep it a buck, right? We should put Prince in the same category. I know Prince was doing some wild stuff, and not just wild because of what he was wearing. I'm talking about Prince was doing some wild stuff to women specifically, right? And little girls. I'm saying women. Let's just little girls. But if it wasn't cool that Christopher Columbus did it, right? And by the way, a lot of you protect Christopher Columbus, but you want me to do all that. But then when it comes to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, right? The cat who wrote Amazing Grace, all these cats, you want me to now, for them, let it go. Well, then that shows for you is double-minded, because that's your standard. Because you say don't listen to R. Kelly, but you say support and defend Thomas Jefferson. And as bad and as terrible as the stuff that R. Kelly allegedly did, I guess you can't say allegedly, he lost, but I'll just go ahead, because black folks who want to uplift this man no matter what he does. So for some of you, allegedly, what R. Kelly did, at the end of the day, R. Kelly ain't nowhere close. Now, sin is sin. Don't get it twisted. But he ain't nowhere close. If that's how you're looking at things, he ain't nowhere close to Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson got him waxed. Come on. I know some of y'all don't say amen. Fine. Ashe, I agree. Whatever. Come on. I know you don't want to hear this. I'm just gonna keep it a buck. If we ain't listening to R. Kelly, why am I supposed to treat what Thomas Jefferson says in such high regard? I'm just honest question. A hush goes over the crowd. Yeah, that's one of them, right? Like you ain't gonna sit here and play with me. Like if Thomas Jefferson has done 20,000 times worse than R. Kelly, then if I can't listen to R. Kelly, why am I supposed to listen to Thomas Jefferson like that? If George Washington has done 10,000 times worse than R. Kelly, then why am I supposed to respect him like that? If Elvis Presley has done hundreds of times worse than them, why should I respect him like that? Hmm? If Jerry Lee Lewis did way more than that, what's the say? Watch this. Oh, y'all about to really be upset. Because they coming up with them pictures of the Epstein stuff. That matter of fact, I saw a couple of them come out with Trump sitting next to them underage girls. Mm-hmm. But you're gonna some of y'all gonna defend it. He told you it was a hoax. Now he says, "Well, shoot, I just happened to be at a party, right?" And but some of y'all want me to support and defend him, but you say don't listen. I'm just saying. I'm just mentioning R. Kelly, just one of them, and I'm not gonna act like there aren't some black folk that obviously have some issues. I mentioned a few others, right? I'm just saying R. Kelly and over and over again because it's very rare you see anybody, even if you listen to R. Kelly, it's very rare that anybody says R. Kelly didn't do it at this point. Right? He might have done everything they said, right? We know what Diddy did. There's another one. Diddy ain't got nothing on Thomas Jefferson. Nothing. Because Thomas Jefferson got what he got from his father. Thomas Jefferson was doing that to underage girls when he was an underage boy. He was trained that. Hmm. Matter of fact, when George Washington became commander in chief, being part of commander in chief in English for the English, and therefore in the beginning in America, to be the commander in chief meant that you got not only to sleep with all the slaves and R word all the Native Americans that you said were nothing and all that, but guess what you also got to do? You also got to sit there and the other persons that were under you in the army, they would let you sleep with their wives, hoping that you would go ahead and give them some kind of boost later on, that you promote them. How you doing, Sky? Thanks for being part of the community. And it is sad. And I'm sorry, Tressa, Teresa. Please forgive me, all right, for miscomprehending or mispronouncing it. I'm not sure what the pronunciation is. That's right. It repeated behavior, and that in and of itself is a generational curse that we don't want to talk about. That these cats that are leading you guys are dealing with generational curses. So when you get a chance, go through that song, right? But we're in the middle of a series called "Reversing the Curse." Means revisiting the lie. And today we're focusing in on the lost cause. Now somebody said we ain't even got to the lost cause yet. We're in the midst of it because this is what they're trying to redo. They're not just trying to talk about the Confederacy only. They're talking about what the Confederacy stood for. And the Confederacy, right? Georgia is where we started. Georgia told us straight up from the beginning, hey, the reason, the reason why we left, right? According to not Kofi, according to not me, according to Georgia, they said because these northern states are messing around too much. Teresa, is that it? Teresa? I don't know if that's how I pronounce it, to be honest. I might have added another pronunciation, right? But so so that's what they said. They then went on after that to say what? Right? They have persistently refused to comply with the express constitutional obligations and to us in the reference to that property, which is a slave. And then on top of that, what? And persistently, by the use of power of the federal government, has striven to deprive us of an equal enjoyment of the common territories of the republic. That's why they have the person they have in office now, trying to make sure that the federal government can reverse some of these things. Let's keep on going. This hostile policy. What did they say this policy is? What did they just tell you the policy is? This hostile policy, the policy of trying to allow black folk to have any kind of freedom, is hostile. Here we go, right? So this hostile policy of our Confederates has been pursued with every circumstance of aggravation which could arouse the passions and excite the hatred of our people, and has placed two sections of the Union for many years past in the condition of virtual civil war. Our people, Georgia saying our country, our state, we have seceded, our people, the people of Georgia, still attached to the Union from habit and addition in the national traditions and averse to change, hoped that time, so this is what they were hoping for. We had hoped that time and reason and argument would bring, if not redress, at least exemption from further insults, injuries, and dangers. Insults, injuries, and dangers. Look at how they're talking about the fact that somebody's saying you can't own black persons. To them, they're saying this does what? It causes them, once again, it's insulting, it causes injury, and it is dangerous. This is their belief system. This is what Georgia said, not what Kofi said. And thank you all for the love. Thank you for reposting. Thanks for being on all the platforms. We appreciate you so very much. Right? You see, this is what they're going to try to change your mind on. It's not as simple as just, oh yeah, the Confederacy, that they got rid of the Confederacy, or the Confederacy, they wanted the Confederacy got rid of, etc., and that's it. It's not that simple, right? In order to make that work, they're going back to say, hey, we identify with George Washington, Virginia slave owner. We identify with John Adams, who lived in the White House, means he was a slave owner, because slaves ran Washington D.C. If you live in D.C., if you ever been to the DMV, if you ever get on the train, go get up there, George Washington Hospital. When you go to George Washington Hospital, if you go to George Washington University Hospital, when you go up there, you're going to get off at a stop. It's called Foggy Bottom. Foggy Bottom is where the slaves lived. It's because they lived in the swamp. D.C. is still a swamp. It just looks nice, right? All the stuff they're talking about Africa and stuff. When I go to Africa, I don't get bit up by tons of mosquitoes, right? I really don't. But in D.C., you're going to get bit. It's a swamp, right? That's where it is. And they rebuilt it. They got slave owners in Virginia and slave owners in Maryland to come together and make that nice, neat little box that used to be. Now it's not a box anymore because Virginia took their land back. Right? That's where that came from. Institutionalized, right? Okay. Recent events, this is what Georgia said, recent events have fully dissipated all such hopes and demonstrated the necessity of separation. Our hopes that you would go ahead and think differently about allowing us to have these slaves. Our Northern Confederates, after a full and calm hearing of all facts, after a fair warning of our purpose not to submit to the rule of the authors of all these wrongs and injuries. By the way, I stopped, excuse me. George Washington, Virginia slave owner, John Adams, slave owner, because he was in the White House, right? So even when they try to say John Adams never owned slaves, you can't be a president back then and not own slaves. Let's walk this down just a little bit. Thomas Jefferson, Virginia slave owner. Madison, Virginia slave owner. Monroe, Virginia slave owner. John Quincy Adams, John Adams Jr., if you will, right? Slave owner. Andrew Jackson, Tennessee slave owner, who got trained in Virginia. Can you see a little pattern popping up? Virginia would be the capital of the Confederacy. See, that's why we got to know how this stuff comes together, right? Number 8 behind him, I think that's Van Buren, who is once again, he was from the North, either New York or he was Madison or somewhere, Madison, New York or Connecticut or Massachusetts or something, but he was up there. So he's slave owner. I think Polk comes behind him, slave owner. We have other persons that'll pop up later on. Taylor, Virginia, or maybe he's not Virginia, maybe he Texas slave owner. But you have all these persons that are coming around. These are slave owners, every single one of them. Lincoln, like I said, slave owner. Ulysses S. Grant, General Grant, who becomes president. Ulysses S. Grant, he was a slave owner. Yes. No, but he became president after, still a slave owner. I know, person don't know that. No, but he was 18, sorry. Lincoln got killed, and then the guy who was from the South that they used, and some will say they bullied, but I mean, he had Southern sensibilities too. But the vice president took over for Lincoln, who opened everything up for all the traders to be able to get all this stuff right back. He's a slave owner. All of them, every single one. The guy who gave a speech and then ended up dying because he got sick, slave owner. Every single one of them. We're not gonna, right? We're not gonna play with it, right? We can't keep playing around with these cats and acting like they're not what they are. You're not spending the money like you spending. All right. Anyways, so back to this. They say they have a large majority committed of the government of the United States into their hands. The people of Georgia, after an equally full and fair and deliberate hearing of the case, have declared with equal firmness that they shall not rule over them, that the federal government, that the union will no longer rule over them. A brief history of the rise, progress, and policy of anti-slavery and the political organization into whose hands the administration of the federal government has been committed with fully justify the pronounced verdict of the people of Georgia. The party of Lincoln. Now, they started seceding when Lincoln had been voted in, or when it became very clear he was voted in. So at the end of 1860, he doesn't become officially the president till about January 1861 or the beginning of 1861 sometimes. He won't become officially the president until then, but persons are afraid. And remember, Lincoln tried to warn everybody. He tried to say, hey, look, I don't think that black persons deserve to be free. I think that white persons will be over them. I agree with Darwin. I agree with Galton. I agree with eugenics. I agree. Right? Hated himself. I got slaves, man. I'm the president of the United States. I got slaves. Just because we're gonna do this, we're just trying to make sure the union come back together. I promise you, I'll keep it together. He said that a couple years before he even ran, when everybody was really worried. We have letters, and even before that too, but we have letters of him writing and trying to get people to calm down. He was like, yo, please. Don't think that I'm coming here to get rid of these slaves. And even if they're not slaves for real, we still gonna treat them like slaves. I just gotta like act like they free. Once they acted a fool though, then he was like, okay, remember he even said if I could keep slavery and free some slaves, I would. If I could keep, I'm sorry, if I could make sure slavery stayed 100% intact and nobody got free and keep the union together, I would. He even said if I could go ahead and make sure that everybody was free, I would. In other words, he said I don't really care about slavery. My first thing is to what? Is to preserve the union. Right? That's why those of you who work for the government or work for the military, when we had to say our stuff, right? You say you state your name, do solemnly swear to what? To support and defend the Constitution of the United States. That's who you work for. You work for the corporation of the United States. You don't work for the people. You don't work for your family. None of that. You belong to them. That's his first things first. Every single time. Sure, Revelation chapter 3, verses 7 through 9 is actually what you should really use, right? Then put it together with Revelation 2:14 and put it together with Revelation chapter 2, verse 9. Right? Then you get the full scope of that just in those three sets of verses. Right? But yeah, so we already hip to that. I'm with you, right? But watch this. So they made it a point. They were afraid because Lincoln got voted in. They were gonna come in and they were gonna get rid of slavery, even though he said that's not what I'm even trying to do. But once they separated, then the only reason why slavery became a focus like that is because it broke the Union. I'm sorry, excuse me, it broke the Confederacy. The Confederacy had gone all in on we're gonna put everything based off of these off of the 1% of the 1% of the 1% who own these huge plantations. Everything runs off of that. We all in on that. So if you break what they're all in on, well then there's nothing you can do. And then if you have Negroes coming and fighting against them. Now, by the way, can we also put a little pin in this real quick and just mention something that I want to make sure you're aware of? Just in case you're not aware of, many of you probably know this, or at least have heard some of this stuff I'm about to use terminology, or at least have heard the terms, and even if you don't know who these people are. But don't forget, right? Please, man, please, sir, never forget that, and I mean this with my whole heart, never forget, beloved, that it was not the Civil War that allowed you to be so-called free. It was your own fight. Before the Civil War, the so-called Civil War, we already had the Seminole Wars, and we already had the Gullah Geechee Wars. And even when it was Negroes that would leave, right, and become free, by the way, that includes Native Americans and stuff as well, which just were all mixed into one pot, right? So there were wars on all fronts, right? So our war for freedom, that's why our war for freedom should be more collective than we think. And it shouldn't be FBA against African, or African against African American, or African American against Negro, or Negro against Native American, etc. Because we all fought together, right? if you know who the Seminoles are. I'm married into the Seminoles, right? If you know who the Seminoles are, right, you know who John Horse is, then you already know a lot of this fighting is crazy. But once again, that's what the enemy does. He still kills and destroys through separation. That's what he does, and we're uplifting it. We're doing exactly what Willie Lynn said. We're not. He said we're not even gonna have to fight. He said they're gonna fight for us, for themselves. They're gonna fight our fight for us. When you realize who you are, you recognize real quick, why are we even doing this? Right? Mess around and put the Irish folk in there who were literally, we forget, they were put in breeding plantations too, because a lot of them didn't go for it. Some of them did. And in Ireland, they don't even mess with them. They consider them to be traitors. Right? Not saying there's no racism in Ireland, I'm just saying, right? It goes even deeper than what we think. There are a lot of Irish who fought in there, a lot of persons from Wales, right, who fought against this because they didn't like what England and the English did to chattel slavery either. And I know in Africa we have, persons over there that just speak through their, what do we call it? Please forgive me. I'm about to mess up the scientific term. Is it phenotype or whatever? Where you can get the blue eyes and blonde hair and stuff like that and things like that. You get straight hair, etc. I'm not saying none of that is true. But some of y'all that got red hair don't even know you got red hair because you're Irish or you got Irish blood. But that's why you have to learn what nationality is, because even though you might have Irish this and Ghanaian this and Nigerian this and Wampanoag this and Choctaw this and Seminole this and and Creek this and Sioux this and Blackfoot this and Anakitawayo this and Iroquois this or Haudenosaunee this, right? Even though you might have all those different things, it is the nation that we're trying to become. That's how nations work. Whatever your father is what you are. That's why you need to know who your father is, because you also need to know the curses that come with your father, right? That's why the hearts of the fathers, Malachi chapter 4, verse 6, another scripture, right? The hearts of the fathers must return to the children, and the hearts of the children must return to their fathers. That also means if we have founding, or if some of you still consider them to be your founding fathers, these persons who did all types of craziness, you need to go back and double check and make sure that you're not caught up on this. I'm going to say that again. If some of these persons are still your founding fathers, then you need to be careful and go back and make sure you look at this relationship, the hearts, right? Because they're not your fathers. If you say that your source is Yah, the word Abba, source, father means, right? Father means source. So if my source is Abraham Lincoln, I should expect that I receive what Abraham Lincoln passes down, right? But if my source is my Father who art in heaven, I should expect that. If my father is righteous, I should expect righteousness. If my father comes with certain curses, certain things, I should expect the father, once again, meaning source. If my father, maybe your father was abusive. I didn't deal with that in my house, but maybe your father was abusive. Put his hands on somebody. Well, then guess what? Be careful. Don't deny it. Don't act like it didn't happen. Make sure you know about it and make sure that you're ready to do whatever it takes to make sure that you break the generational curse so that the curses of the father are not revisited generationally 3 or 4 generations down the road. Right? If your father, I'm going to use the word, I don't know if it's going to get us in trouble or not, it is what it is. If your father was a coon, I know, that's difficult now. I know I'm talking about daddy. I said if. If the shoe fits, wear it. If it don't, take it off, right? If your father was bourgeoisie, if your father denies Christ, if your father doesn't want to be somebody who helped, if your father says, well, I didn't start racism, if your father says racism doesn't really matter, if your father says, I support whatever your thing is that you want to go ahead and say, whatever, then admit to it. It doesn't mean that you still can't honor, respect them, and love them, but you got to learn how to make sure that at least you tell the truth. And one of the reasons why it's difficult for us to have these conversations because we don't want to admit, like, yo, we're living with a lot of stuff and we're not taking a hold of it. Right? We living with a lot of stuff. We don't want to talk about lust issues and stuff that keep on being revisited upon us. We love to say, have mercy upon us. But have mercy upon what? You keep acting like you have no sin. And once again, scripture, right? If you act like you have never sinned or have no sin, then what? Then you are a liar and the truth is not in you. And you shouldn't be going to your Father who art in heaven because your prayers are not something that he's even receiving. You don't want to do the labor. The harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Everybody want to talk about this stuff, but nobody want to put in the work. I'm on. Amen. I know. I know it's hard, right? But it's real. If we're gonna reverse the curse, we gotta revisit the lie. Even the lies that you don't have to go back and admit that maybe your people is in on some stuff. You know, a person come to me all the time, Pastor Kofi, can you tell me how to find out who is this or who is this or who my family, blah blah, right? And they don't want to do it because you can tell them, but they just want you to tell them who it is. But it's like, wait, you need to also, if you're gonna go that route, figure out the things they were into, because you need to come up out. There's some things. See, this is why we got to get over this weird thing where somebody's like, "Well, I didn't start chattel slavery." Yeah, neither did I. I'm not talking about it because I started it. I'm not even talking about it. Watch this. This is gonna mess with some of you. If we talking about biblically though, if you want to be for real, I'm not even talking about it because I'm going to finish it. Right? I'm separating from it. I'm not here to try and teach you how to make sure that you include yourself or integrate into a racist collective. Right? I love me some Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. more than most, even though he's not exactly what persons might think that he was. That being said, right, he shed blood. You can talk all the trash you want. You can disagree with some of this stuff, but we ain't gonna act like he ain't shed some blood, right? I know some persons are on this thing where they don't want you talk about martyrdom, even though I think martyrdom also too we should talk about the dom or the dominion of it and who makes you the martyr, right? Right? Who makes one a martyr? I think that should be what something that enters into the equation. But I get the arguments on all different sides with that. That being said, right? I respect him because at least he was willing to put in the work, right? So if he shed blood, right, then we should at least say, okay, he more dedicated than many. Yeah, if you ever go back, you ever heard that sermon by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? If I had what was it? If I had a sneeze, I believe that's the message that he gave. Go listen to that and be empathetic instead of being like, well, he was communist now, or now he's whitewashed, or blah blah whatever. As if y'all care about that when it comes to y'all favorite performers and stuff, and the persons that y'all listen to and stuff like that. Y'all, yeah, right? But go listen to if you never heard that sermon. If I would have sneezed, I think that's what it's called, and see his dedication, and see the fear that he went through, and see how he was hoping and praying that something as natural that his body probably needed to go through as sneezing. He was praying that he wouldn't sneeze because if so, he would have died because the attacks that were on his life. I'm just saying. I'm just saying, right? He shed blood. It's always weird when somebody who's dedicated so much that they sacrifice on behalf of you, that you come behind them and then you ready to tear him up. If you don't agree with what he agreed with, like I got a lot of persons I don't agree with. I'm like a whole bunch of other persons. Everybody got, that gay aunt, their gay uncle or whatever in their family and stuff like that, sure. But it ain't like uncle made sure that I was fed and stuff. And so I'm thankful. He made sure I had a roof over my head a couple times. I'm thankful. It don't mean that I'm trying to go ahead and uphold and uplift his lifestyle. But dang, he took care of me. I'm not gonna act like he had nothing of no value. I know Hebrew Israelites ain't supposed to talk like this, or maybe we should. Right? I'm not here to uplift it. I'm just saying we gonna and, if somebody took care of us, I'm not gonna pretend like this man ain't do what he that be so graining on the mind. Listen to these cats. Oh yeah, man. Martin Luther King Jr. He blah blah. Man, Martin Luther King Jr. Right, and even when he messed up, at least he came back and said, "I fear I've brought my people into a burning house," and that's ultimately what I was trying to get to. Is that I'm not here to bring you into a burning house of racism. I'm here to tell you how to make sure that you leave it, separate, and let's make sure we don't bring that fire over to where we are. Racism is going to get worse because racism is sin. You know that, right? Until Yahashua comes back, the sin's going to be there. Our goal is to make sure that we get away from it and make sure that if we are in the world, not of it, that the times that we have to be in that mess, then at least you know that it exists. You know how to defend yourself. But the goal ultimately is for us to become a nation to where anybody, right? Any man, any woman who decides that Christ is king and becomes part of Yahweh Sha'al, whether it be born or grafted in, following the law, following the word, following his spirit, and fighting against any sin, including the sin of racism, white supremacy, and fighting against the law of the lost cause. We're here to make sure that we prepare a place, a safe place, that we can make sure allows us to grow as a nation. That's what it's about. So when a person say, why are you talking about this? Or why do you talk about this stuff so much? Because it's one of the most pervasive and persuasive and insinuated and woven in sin into the fabric of society that has ever existed. And we're not going to pretend that we shouldn't fight against it and that we shouldn't speak against it and that the Most High himself hasn't spoken against it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, right? No, you know, the Most High, he told Moses and them, he told Joshua and them, he told this person to eradicate them and blah, blah, whatever. Yeah, it wasn't because of the color of their skin. I'm just, you know, we got to get out of this thing. How you doing, Rome? Thanks for being part of the community. How you doing, Father of Yashlech? I'm not sure how you pronounce it, the dialect you speak, right? But we're gonna stop all that. Thank y'all for the love. We're gonna stop acting like we can use scripture. That's a very Christian thing to do. That you're gonna use scripture to try and allow racism, white supremacy to watch this. See, racism, white supremacy can never be forgiven. The persons who did it should be forgiven. I'm not walking around with Abraham Lincoln on my back all day, right? But the system is not to be forgiven. See, I know this is vexing to some. This is vexing to some. Racism, white supremacy is not forgiven. It's not even a real thing. It's not a person. If you're looking at it as one, it's a corporation, which is still an artificial person, right? You said that's not a Christian thing to do? Okay, well, once again, and you said don't put that on us? All right. Christian nationalism, Christian exceptionalism, American exceptionalism, right? What does it speak to? By the way, when I say Christian, maybe you should know what I mean. Now, I'm not a Christian, but I believe in the word. That being said, you said don't put that on us. Okay, cool. What is a Christian? And watch this. What does the Christian do to make sure that they fight against racism, white supremacy? Let me ask you this. How about this? Because there's a lot of stuff. See, I get it. If I'm not careful, I'm painting with too broad a brush. And you're assuming that I mean everybody, right? But if you don't know me, if this is your first time listening, whatever, you probably already think you know exactly what I mean. So let's ask this. I'm just going to give some examples. What does Pastor Jamal Bryant do to fight against racism, white supremacy? Let's be direct. What does Bishop T.D. Jakes do to fight against racism, white supremacy? Right? Let's just be real. Like, what does Joel Osteen? These are persons that I admire to a certain degree, but also we got to tell the truth. What does Joel Osteen do to fight against racism, white supremacy? Who's that cat that barely preaches, but is a reverend, and now he be all over CNN? Used to be big. James Brown's godson. I can't recall his name right now, but you know who I'm talking about. What does he do to fight racism, white supremacy? And I didn't say what did they say. And even if what they say, let's get into it too. But what did they do? Why did they not touch it? Rick Warren, big time name. Have you heard what he says about racism, white supremacy? Why is it that I'm just let's just this is what I mean. Systematically, structurally. How you have thousands of acres of land and your people don't eat. Okay? right? And then hide behind scripture to say why it's okay that your people don't eat. Jamal Bryant has oft more black babies in the wombs of the women that he was cheating with his wife with at the time in Baltimore, and probably since, right? Has oft more black babies in the womb than persons who have gotten thousands of years of sentencing in the system for offing 2 or 3 persons, and still preaches. And now he's allowed to. He found a pulpit that he can preach from to say why he should off so many so-called so-called black babies in the womb. He's doing the work that Margaret Sanger started when she went into so-called black churches and began to pay them so that she can go ahead and preach that A word that rhymes with extortion. I'm just saying, right? When we talk about this stuff, this is what I mean, right? Joel Osteen wouldn't make sure that persons who were drowning could be could come in his church. That's part of the problem because it's his church. It's not the Most High's. But wouldn't let him come in his church. Told you that everybody was lying about it, and then he had to come out and apologize because he was lying. Rick Warren is busy telling you, stop talking about all this stuff, and hey, man, all lives matter. And then he wrote the book that you read on a purpose-driven life. Paula White, disciple of Bishop T.D. Jakes, made it a point that when everybody started arguing on these things, made it a point to say, no, we're going to be MAGA. And now she's the president's prayer warrior. So sitting there having them prayer service talking about the angels are being dispersed in America. The angels are being dispersed in Africa right now. In Africa right now. Angels are being dispersed in Africa. You've seen that before. Am I lying? And because we don't want to tell the truth about this stuff, this is what I mean. Watch this. There's a lot of persons that are in the world that will never come into your churches because they see that they see that nobody will call that out. And then when we do call it out and we actually use the word of Yah to show you why it should be called out, not saying you in particular, right? In general, when we start saying, hey, these things are going on, persons start coming on and using scripture, trying to give us scripture, trying to tell us why this stuff is acceptable. No, take that somewhere. Take it to the curb with the rest of the trash. How you doing, Sister Allison? Yeah, what? Right? And by the way, you know that before the Bible was written, or what we call the Bible, because it wasn't even called the Bible at first, right? But before the Bible was written, there was no such thing as a Christian. I'm not sorry. Before what you call the Bible existed, or let's do it like this. It's easy to say it like this. The Bible, when the Bible was written, there was no such thing as a Christian. They had to write that in later. And even the term Christian is not a term that comes from believers. The term Christian is a term that comes from pagans and their descriptions of believers, right? And even being saddened by it. If you study Christianos and the history of that word, you'll discover that it actually used to be considered to be somebody with a mental health disorder. They would actually see that you were a Christian. They say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And even the 2 times that they try to put it in Paul's mouth, or I'm sorry, well, 2 times they try to put it in the New Testament, just throw it in there, right? You actually see that both times it's actually a challenge. Well, if you're really a Christian, like you say you are, then do da da da. Because nobody wanted to be Cristianos. Because Christians mix iron with clay. If you know about Daniel chapter 2, right, you're getting to the same thing. So Christianity and what you think of Christianity today, Roman Catholicism, which turns into Protestantism, or if you're on the east side of Rome, it turns into Orthodox Christianity. They are two things that mix different belief systems together. Right? Now, if you still say, well, that's not what I mean when I say cool, you're going by a new definition that's being made up on the fly. But if you're talking about what the actual word means, no. Like, when the Bible was written, there was no such thing as a Christian. But this As far as American, right? As far as especially American, but we could say Canadian, we could say English, we could say Mexican, we could say Brazilian, we could say Argentinian, we could say, the list goes on and on, right? We could say Russian, we could say, but as far as even let's focus on American, because that's what we're talking about with the secession of states and the lost cause rhetoric. Well, if we be real, if we keep it a buck, as far as Christian nationalism, it's a sin. And if we defend these pastors that are into Christian nationalism, then just know that Yah is not pleased. That's right. If they believe in the Most High, right, but step over the homeless at the church doors, yeah. Which, by the way, is the same story of the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man, when he would enter into the gate, Lazarus, the poor man, was too broke, but also was hurt and was dirty, and therefore should not have been. He was not clean enough to enter into the temple, even though that's a little overdone because, you know, just because he can't bathe or whatever doesn't necessarily mean, depending on how bad I guess it was, but you shouldn't not allow him to be able to get into the presence of the Most High. That being said, though, that's the story. He's sitting at the gate at the temple. Right, the gate is called Beautiful. The door, the gate, the dalat is called Beautiful, and he should be allowed to go in, but he's not allowed to go in. He sits there and he asks for alms since he can't go. And there's a rich man who has not only the ability to let him in, but has the ability to at least bare minimum make sure that he puts something in his cup. But he will not do so. All of a sudden, both of them end up dying, and it is the rich man who is in Sha'al or hell, and it is Lazarus who is in the bosom of Abraham, right? It's the rich man who says he wants to go back and tell his family because his family goes to temple but doesn't believe that what they're doing is wrong simply because they have money. So they can go to temple and do whatever they want. But here's Lazarus who's not allowed to go into the physical temple but is allowed to be in the bosom of Abraham. If I could be honest, that's modern Christianity in a nutshell. Here we are at a point where, as far as spending money, we're at like zero as far as SOC. And I can say, even as a pastor who has been blessed to be able to do a lot of stuff, here I am, to be honest, where I ain't that far from zero. We know that it gets better, but this is always tough time. These seasons or whatever, winter season for us is always really tough. And here it is where somebody will come to me and be getting on me about all this stuff. And meanwhile, they won't call out their pastor who has the ability to forget me. I'm not even part of the congregation. What about when I'm gonna tell you some true experiences. I, as a pastor, had to deal with persons who die in other congregations, who say that they believe in this and blah blah. Everybody loves them, but their congregations won't help them be buried, even when their congregations make $10 million a week. But because the person didn't tithe the last 2 months, they won't bury it. Even when we're talking about the lost cause, if I can be honest, Holy Spirit taking this a little different way, but because this kind of still works, because at the end of the day, this is why a lot of persons even think that the Bible has become a lost cause, because the persons who swear that they live by it don't live by it. And when they see that we're still living through the procedures and systemic rhetoric that was put in place through this lost cause we're focusing on, and we won't say anything about it, they think we're a lost cause. I wrote a book a while ago, years ago now, probably 10 years ago or so, called Does It Really Matter That Jesus Was Black? And you know why I wrote it? Because young children would come up to me, and the answer, by the way, is it matters as far as truth. Does it matter as far as salvation? No. Right? As far as if you're black, are you better than somebody that's white? But the children would ask, and everybody would, when I say children, like the teenagers, there'd be a whole bunch of teenagers rolling together, going to their church, and the pastors, the overseer would not answer the question. So finally, they asked me because they knew I knew about the stuff, and I told them. And it caused me to realize that a lot of persons want to know this as I was answering them, because teenagers are a very interesting group, because a lot of times we lose our teenagers and our young adults, and they don't really come back, if they come back at all, until they're like 30, 40, 50 years old, right? So when I heard that, I started looking at worldwide, I started looking at the conversation. I was like, yeah, we should speak about this. Because if it's the truth, it's the truth. But persons look at us as a lost cause because we don't admit that we're affected a lot by the lost cause. right? So ultimately, the book proves a whole bunch of stuff, shows why it's there, shows who Israel is, shows what Negro actually means, because Negro used to be a nation. Now you think it means black. It didn't mean that even in the original language, and that means the original language that the Spanish learned from, because they didn't used to use the term negro. If you go to Spain right now, they won't call you negro, they'll call you moreno because you're brown, right? Negro is due to the fact of there was a particular nation that lived in Spain, right? That was considered to be Israel, right? Known as the Negro because they called themselves Negro from back in West African times when they had been scattered already, right? But if nobody tells us this, as the word says, here we go again, scripture, Romans chapter 10, verses 13 through 16, right? Anyone who calls upon the name of Yahweh, or the name of Adon, the name of the Lord, or the name of Yahshua, the name of the Lord, they shall be saved. But how can one be saved if they do not believe? And how can one believe what they have not heard? And how can one hear it if nobody proclaims or preaches it? And how can somebody preach it if they're not sent by the Most High Yah? For how beautiful are the steps to the order of the feet of those who actually preach and present the righteousness of the word. Verse 16 quotes Isaiah 53, verse 1, which is once again, who shall believe our report? If we don't report the truth, it's not for the world to. In many places, especially in modern Christianity, are averse to telling the truth. Go there right now and ask them. All right, we're about to start coming up on Christmas. We're going to have to talk about the truth about Christmas, all right, in this series. Go to somebody and ask them, hey, um, real quick question. Ask them, like, what is, what does the Bible say about Christmas? Some of them don't even know what I'm about to say, number two. But number one, it says in Jeremiah chapter 10, verses 1 through 5, to not be, it says, Shema Yachad Sha'al. So that's for us as Israel, hero Israel. Excuse me, do not be like those that are pagan. Do not be afraid of changing the seasons. Do not go into the woods. Do not hire somebody to chop down a tree. Do not drag the tree into your house. Do not stand it straight up. Do not nail it so it stands straight up. Do not paint it silver and gold. Right? It says all that. Now ask your pastor why there's going to be a Christmas tree if there's not already one, not just outside but inside. Ask him why he's going to allow persons to wear Santa Claus hat. Ask him why he's going to allow them to wear floppy ears, as elves. Or her. That's why persons think we are lost cause. Salah. That's why. Is it Jay-Z or Jay's? Thanks for being part of the community. Real Diamond Cannon, thanks for being part of the community. Right? This is why. So, anyways, right? That's Jeremiah chapter 10, verses 1 through 5. Jeremiah chapter 10, verses 1 through 5. Right? And by the way, there'll be somebody who's then going to try to defend it, and they're going to say, well, wait a minute, it's just talking about idols. Yeah, okay, because if you know what a Christmas tree is, then it in and of itself is an idol. If you don't know why they drag the Christmas tree in, usually you're looking for an evergreen tree, a pine tree, right? You drag it in because pine trees are supposed to remain green. So they believe, remember it says, don't be afraid of changing the seasons. They believe that when the seasons change, or when winter happens, they believe that terrible spirits around Hallows Eve, around Halloween, right? These terrible spirits have started to take over, right? And so you basically are in a place where the sun, when it's at its lowest, their belief system is that means that, oh, it must be the worst day, the worst time. Winter solstice, Saturnalia, look up that stuff too, right? So what do? You bring a tree into your house that's evergreen, and you stand it straight up, and you put even what you call ornaments and stuff now, what it's become, and you put all these things to try and bring life into your house. But then eventually you'll discover that the tree is going to start shedding, right? It's going to start dying, and so it's going to start losing those things on it, those pine needles, and sometimes even if you get something that still has leaves on it, etc. And so what do? You take it out your house. That's one of the reasons why persons are like, why you still got that Christmas tree up? You don't even know where that comes from. But that comes from a mindset and a thought process that you're not supposed to keep that tree up. It's not supposed to stay like that. It's not. So you better get it out. You're supposed to get it out because you're only supposed to have it up at a certain amount of time because it's supposed to give life. Once it starts dying, it no longer gives life. Now, when you go to your church and you see that there and you ask your pastor, some of them will tell you that they know that you're absolutely right. Which then my next question would be, well, if I'm absolutely right, then why would you do that? And then watch them. Oh, well, persons love Christmas. Or my wife, she really likes this. Or my husband, he really wants this in here. Or, hey, well, it's just a way to get people in. It's the season, and a lot of persons don't come to church unless it's Easter or Christmas, which you're not supposed to do Easter either. Passover and Ishtar are not the same thing. Go ahead and ask him. How you doing, Sister Tasha? Go ahead and ask him. See what they say. Right? But that's why we become a lost cause, too. Because we don't admit that, like, yo, what are you doing? That's part of what we do. Like, we don't even have to do it for the world. Like, the world gonna world. But, man, if we say we worship, then yo, let's call that out. And we don't always have to be mean about it. Like yesterday, when I was invited to preach, I knew my assignment. They put me up first. When they put me up first, I understood my assignment. I had 20 minutes to make sure that I delivered a message that was going to tell persons about salvation, what it was from the perspective of the word, make sure that some persons who never heard the true name of the living Yah heard it, and heard the message from a kingdom perspective, and to make sure that we set the groundwork and the foundation for everything going on. That's what I came and I did. I didn't have to come in there and tell everybody. I didn't have to flip over tables and all that. If I'm led to, I don't mind flipping tables, but I didn't have to do all that. I came in there and I delivered the word. Now the seed is planted. We'll see if the ground is ready to receive. Now those who have ears to hear. If they're swine, we'll find out. Right? But I came there to cast pearls to those that'll catch it. If there happen to be some swine around, then they're around. All right. All right, I'm done with that part. Hopefully you got the lost cause correlation, right? Let's finish strong, though. Let's finish strong. We're talking about, once again, today, if you're just joining us, we're in the midst of a series called Reversing the Curse Means Revisiting the Lie. You can always catch up on the recordings that we have on different platforms. And also, too, let's see, Reversing the Curse Means Revisiting the... Oh, yeah, and also, too, we are focusing specifically today on the lost cause, ultimately, which is saying, why did the South secede from the North? And how you doing, Empowerment Exchange? Thanks for being on with us. Alrighty. So Georgia told us why they seceded. And by the way, there's a lot to that. If you want to go through all that and read it, feel free. I'm not reading the whole thing. Like I said, I'm telling you where to go. So Georgia is up. Or Georgia, we just read why they said they seceded. All right, let's go to Mississippi. M-I, what is it? M-I, cricket letter, I, cricket letter, I, humpback, I. All right, let's go to Mississippi. They said that they seceded too. We know they seceded, and they told us why they seceded. All right, let's see what they say. This is not Kofi, once again. This is not the black man with black, who's causing black fatigue and da. No. This is the so-called white man who fought for the valiant cause of states' rights. What were the states' rights for? All right, Mississippi. In Mississippi, it says a declaration. A what? What they say? What are they doing? They're declaring. It's a declaration. A declaration of the immediate causes which induce and justify the secession of the state of Mississippi from the federal union. That's what they said. That's how they started off. This is what this is. What did they say? They said, in the momentous step which our state has taken of dissolving its connection with the government of which we so long formed a part, it is but just that we should declare the prominent reasons which have induced our course. Fair enough. If we're going to leave the United States, basically what they said, if we're going to leave y'all, it's only fair and right that we would tell you why we're leaving. Cool. What they say, our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery. What they say? Time out. It wasn't about slavery, right? They didn't even take, Georgia at least beat around the bush a little bit and then kind of was like sneaking it in and using parts of the Constitution and the preamble and using parts of the Constitution and using part of the Bill of Rights and using parts of the Declaration of Independence. But here they ain't even booted around the bush. They said our position is thoroughly identified. Thoroughly. If you want to know where we stand, thoroughly. That means go through, comb through it. Right? That means take some time out to really research. They said if you want to know our position, it is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery. And watch this. This is how they describe the institution of slavery. The greatest material interest of the world. That's what they said. I ain't say it. I'm telling you what they said. How you doing, Tony? That's me per minute. I didn't say it. I'm telling you exactly what they said. I'm gonna read it again. This time I won't stop. Just one sentence. First sentence. I'm sorry, first sentence of the second paragraph. Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world. And you know they thought that. They thought that the Roman Catholic Church was gonna back him up. Roman Catholic Church almost did. But they're like, no, we're not gonna roll with you. Right? They thought that other countries were gonna step in and be on their side. Right? They thought the world was going to say, man, bump the U.S., especially because a lot of persons didn't like the U.S. because the U.S. had done them dirty and made a lot of them go bankrupt. Hey, France should be on our side. If nobody else, England will be on our side. That's nobody stepped up. They've never the Confederacy, even the Confederate, what we call the Confederate flag. You know that X that goes across, that big X that goes across. If you're not aware, that X actually is not even their flag. That's appropriated. That comes from the Iroquois, or who you call the Iroquois, really the Haudenosaunee, right? That's their flag that they had before there was such thing as a Confederacy, or the Confederacy of the United States. So in other words, the Confederacy has never been, the only confederacies that have ever been approved worldwide are actually Native American. There is no such thing as a confederacy, right? As far as officially ever. Then 4 years, 5 years, 4 or 5 years. There's no such thing as a confederacy ever. They're fighting for something that's not even lawful, constitutional, legal, that has no nationality, nothing. But they tell you and I we shouldn't fight for our nationality. Meanwhile, how hard do they fight for something that has never been a nationality? All right. So what you say again, Mississippi? Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world. Its labor supplies the product. Well, they're going to tell you the truth. Its labor supplies the product which constitutes by far the largest and most important positions of commerce of the earth. They said if it's not for these black slaves, the earth wouldn't run. That's what they said. I didn't say it. You can disagree, cool, but you're not disagreeing with me. You're disagreeing with them. All right, y'all caught that? All right, this is not me saying. I'm just reading. Once again, they said its labor supplies the product which constitutes by far the largest and most important portions of commerce of the earth. These products are peculiar to the climate verging on the tropical regions. So they're not even just talking about in their state. They're saying on the earth, and they're even talking about tropical regions, right? They're saying that black folk basically can be in tropical places and we can't. We need to use them to be able to make the money that we need, because if they don't do it for us, then who will? Because we can't do it, we'll die. In Israel right now, the difference between an Israeli and an Israelite, right? Besides, you talk about the stuff that comes with the fact that they be R-worded in babies and stuff, and they be catching, sexual diseases and stuff. Besides those diseases, guess what the number one, I think still on top of that, the number one disease that an Israeli will die from, right? When we're talking about Ashkenazi, right? An Israeli will die from is what? It's skin cancer. Not designed for that. No shade. It's just that's what it is, right? You can put on as much sunscreen as you want. You ain't gonna make it. Right? You better be inside. You need somebody else to do that for you. By the way, why is it that they never talk about chattel slavery that exists in Israel? There's no such thing. Do your research. Allegedly, because they'll shut me down. I shouldn't have said that. They might try to shut me down. Y'all pray for me. They might come after that. Right? Okay. All right. Its labor supplies the product which constitutes by far the largest and most important portions of commerce on the earth. Right? These products are peculiar to the climate verging on the tropical regions, and by an imperious law, the empire of nature. The imperious law, the emperor. Remember, emperor actually means slave. So, right, so by the imperious law of nature. Now, remember, Georgia was talking about the laws of nature and the laws of the universe, universal law. Here they are using the same mindset. Right? So by the imperious law of nature, none but the black race can bear exposure to the tropical sun. So they're saying we shouldn't just let black folk make money off this, or black folk be free. We need to make money off of the stuff in the tropical climate. And nobody can do this work except so-called black persons. right? And by the way, if you're using modern Hebrew, if the whole goal, I mean, I know the characters that you're using, but if the whole goal is to be like, you're gonna put modern Hebrew on here, I'm not really in the modern Hebrew like that. I go by Avda, right? I have others in my family though. So if you want to actually send some stuff, if there's something of actual value, I kind of know what you're saying, but if there's some actual value you want to use, but yeah, I don't read modern Hebrew because it's not Hebrew. Um, that being said, right, those pictographs are not Hebrew; they're not original. That being said, there was no choice. I'm sorry, here we are. So the empirics law of nature. None but the black race can bear exposure to the tropical sun. These products have been necessities of the world, and a blow at slavery is a blow at commerce and civilization. A blow at slavery is a blow at what? At commerce, and according to them, it is a blow to what they consider to be civilization. You can't have civilization if you don't have slaves. That's what they said. That's what they still teach. You'll still hear persons all the time saying that too, right? You'll have persons. Hey, what? That's when they jump in. See, that's why you got to know the mindset. Somebody will jump in and they'll go, "Oh, well, you talking all that, but everybody's been slaves. Nobody. There's never been a time when they haven't been slaves. That's not true either. But there's never been a time where nobody was slaves. This is the same rhetoric. Look, man, you gotta have slaves. It is what it is. It would be a blow to commerce and civilization. That blow has been long aimed at the institution. What is the institution? The institution of slavery. And was at the point of reaching its consummation. There was no choice left us but submission to the mandates of abolition, not to abolish slavery, to abolish ties to anybody that comes at slavery, or a dissolution of the Union, whose principles had been subverted to work out the ruin, that we do not overstate the dangers of our institution. A reference to a few facts will sufficiently prove. In other words, just in case you think that we're going too far, we also believe that it's fair. Remember, they said we're writing this because we believe it's fair and it's just that we would tell you why we're leaving and why we think that thoroughly, to know why we're leaving is thoroughly tied to slavery, which they say is the greatest institution, the greatest thing that ever exists, that has ever existed on earth. Watch this. These are the things they're going to use to prove. I'm not going to read all of them. We're going to skip to the next state. But let's just see some of this stuff they said. I didn't write it. They said the hostility to this institution, slavery, commenced before the adoption of Constitution. Once again, this is not just a fact that started right in 1860. They're saying this themselves. I'm not the only one. I'm just telling you, telling you what happened. They're saying right now, in this time that they're in, the hostility to this institution commenced before the adoption of the Constitution and was manifested in the well known Ordinance of 1787 in regard to the Northwestern Territory. Okay. This feeling increased until in 1819 to 20, it deprived the South of more than half of the vast territory acquired from France. In other words, when there was the Louisiana Purchase, we should have got way more of that, and there should be more slave states. All right. The same hostility dismembered Texas and seized upon all the territory acquired from Mexico. Even though Texas will secede too, we're going to read about Texas, so this is a really weird argument. But that being said, if you know, like Texas actually belonged to Mexico, and the reason why Texas seceded from Mexico in the first place, that's what happened, is there was a civil war, right? If you want to call it that, a revolution that not Mexicans, even though some so-called white Mexicans had slaves, but Mexico had really like gotten rid of slavery, and Mexico had a law that got rid of slavery. That's one of the reasons why the Seminoles came down to Mexico and they fought with us against those right who were trying to fight, right, trying to reclaim John Horse and all those Seminoles that left, right. So, but Texas, right, had persons that wanted to keep chattel slavery. So they seceded from Mexico. And then when the North wanted to keep chattel slavery, Texas, as we'll read in a second, then they seceded from the North. It's right in here, right? They're telling you. So when I say this stuff, I'm not like somebody be like, man, you making this up. The person who would disagree with me the most agrees with this. Hey, how you doing, Brother Cole? I hear you. I'm about to start shoveling something a little bit too. Prayerfully, some of it melts. And it's family day too. So we're going to get up in there. So I'm going to have some fun today. Right? Watch this. It has grown until it denies the right of property in slaves and refuses protection to that right on the high seas and the territories and wherever the government of the United States had jurisdiction. Territories, by the way, is United States way of saying colonies. And how you doing, DJ? Thanks for being on. All right, I'll give a few more. It tramples the original equality of the South underfoot. The South says we were only equal to the North because we had slavery. That's what they're saying. It said it nullified the fugitive slave law in almost every free state of the Union and has utterly broken the compact with our fathers pledged, or when our fathers pledged their nation to maintain. In other words, the founding fathers were slave owners. They were cool with slavery. Why are y'all coming against it? But the other part of that they're saying is what? Is that it broke the fugitive slave law. In other words, police officers have the same badges that um, that what you used to call them back in the day. Somebody help me out. The police officers have the same badges as the what you used to call them back in the day, the slave catchers, but that's not their official title. What were they? Slave catchers. Okay, so the slave catchers had the same badges. Patrol, slave patrol. Thank you. Yeah, slave patrol. So when somebody goes on patrol, same as like somebody goes on slave patrol. And so they would go and they would find persons. They could go into the north and look for persons too. Sometimes would even just grab random black persons and say, hey, we're just going to sell them back in. They did that during the Civil War, by the way, General Lee and President Jefferson Davis. They fought. They went into D.C. even. They took all these people from Virginia and stuff and from Maryland, parts of Maryland and stuff apparently. And they ran and took them all back down into the South, whether they were free or not. And they sold them into slavery. But also, too, they had a fugitive slave act, right? To where basically if you were a slave and you ran away from your master, even if you went to a free state, even if they found you in Canada, they would kind of let this ride, even though Canada wasn't supposed to. But even if they found you in another place or whatever, they would, in the North especially, right? North, if you escaped and you got to Ohio, if they tracked you, the slave catcher with his patrol, right, his slave patrol badge and everything, tracked you up there and found you, they were allowed to bring you back. They're saying, well, wait a minute, if you guys are going to get rid of slavery, you're not only doing that, but you're putting police officers, you're putting slave patrolmen out of business. You're messing up. See, it's messing up all types of business. How you doing, Minister Raj? You see that? All right. And lastly, this will be the last one. It advocates Negro equality, socially and politically, and promotes insurrection and incendiarism in our midst. In other words, you're going to let black folk be free. You're about to mess up the whole thing. Our whole thing that we're governed by in the South is that black folk are not folk. Right? It's folklore to call a black man a man. In the South, at that time, you catch that? It's folklore to call them folk. Remember, when they wrote "We the People," that didn't include you. It included women. It didn't include a lot of persons from other countries. Right? It didn't even include as many white persons as you would think, as many white males, because even they didn't have the right to vote. Only 6% of what they considered the country to be when George Washington got voted in could vote. That's crazy, right? Only 6% were people. See, this is why you got to get over. Like, I'm not going to help anybody else, but if you don't help somebody else, it's only a matter of time before they're going to come for you. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and hit up South Carolina. South Carolina, where you get in the rockets, red glare, the bombs bursting in the air gave proof to the night that our flag was still there. That's where that was pinned. When he was proud in the third stanza to see the hireling and slave go down in the water and never make it back up. This is South Carolina. South Carolina that had the same issue with bourgeoisie that Louisiana did. Same South Carolina. All right. South Carolina, right up the road from Wilmington, North Carolina, 1898, wiped out persons living in the graveyard for weeks at a time, hoping that they don't get killed. Besides those that ended up in the grave. All right, South Carolina, they said this is a declaration of the immediate causes which induce and justify the secession of South Carolina from the Federal Union. Okay, this is why South Carolina said it seceded. So far, Two for two. Georgia said we left because chattel slavery. We got to keep it. Um, uh, who we just read? Missouri or Mississippi said we got to go ahead and leave because chattel slavery should be kept. All right, watch this. The people of the state of South Carolina in convention assembled on the 26th day of April, AD 1852. Okay, hold on now. Because you were told, oh yeah, they all seceded. Matter of fact, I think I accidentally said everybody seceded in 1860, right? But what does it say? It said they came together in 1852. In 1852, they were already coming together, seeing where this was headed. They declared that the frequent violations of the Constitution of the United States by the federal government and its encroachments upon the reserved rights of states fully justified this state in then withdrawing from the federal union. But in deference to the opinions and wishes of the other slaveholding states, she forbore at that time to exercise this right. Since that time, these encroachments have continued to increase, and further forbearance ceases to be a virtue. In other words, same thing that we started off with the other. Like, hey, all right, we were waiting for you guys to get your stuff in order. You guys didn't go ahead and bow down to what we said about slavery needs to be kept, and that we can no longer tolerate this. All right. Now watch this. And now the state of South Carolina, having resumed her separate and equal place among nations, right? Because it's a state. A state is a nation, right? The United States are 50 nations. The only reason why it's a federal union, you're talking about the corporation that they all have decided to bind, but that's the artificial version, right? Each state is a country within itself. All right. And now the state of South Carolina, having resumed her separate and equal place among nations, deems it due to herself, to the remaining United States of America, and to the nations of the world that she should declare the immediate causes which have led to this act. In the year, how far they're going to go back? You ready? Let's see how far they go back. In the year 1765. In what year? That's quite a ways away. This is supposedly supposed to be like 1865. Them talking about 1850 or 1860s, talking about 1852. They said no, we're going back to 1765. We had a problem with y'all. Mm. That seems a lot longer than what we were taught, isn't it? How you doing, Sister Vivian? Thank you for being on, and thank y'all for the love. All right, so what did they say? South Carolina said in the year 1765, that portion of the British Empire embracing Great Britain undertook to make laws for the government of that portion composed of the 13 American colonies. So they're going to try and once again tie their right to have slaves to what the founding fathers want. All right. Okay. So that what in the year 1765, a portion of the British Empire embracing Great Britain undertook to make laws for the government of that portion composed of the 13 American colonies. A struggle for the right of self-government ensued and resulted on the 4th of July, 1776, in a declaration by the colonies that they are and of right ought to be free and independent states, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all acts and things which independent states may of right do. Now, if you miss one of those things he listed or they listed, it's very important that you comprehend when they said all these things. So they just throw this in here. But watch this. It says they should have right to have full power to levy war, full power to conclude peace, full power to contract alliances, and full power to do what? Also, establish commerce. A slave is property. So when they're using this is a way of them being able to say, hey, we have the right to make money the way we want. Okay? And they're saying this was what was really fought for back in 1776. They're telling you that when George Washington, Virginia slave owner, was fighting, and Thomas Jefferson, Virginia slave owner, was writing, and Madison and Monroe and all these persons we just mentioned, they're telling you when they were fighting, they as slave owners were fighting to make sure that they could keep slaves. Commerce. Okay. They further solemnly declared that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of the ends for which it was established, they're saying it was established to make sure we could have slaves. It is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government, deeming the government of Great Britain to have become destructive of these ends. They declared that the colonies are absolved from all allegiance to the British crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And by the way, they're not lying to you here on this part. They're lying obviously about the fact that we're just commerce. But hear what I'm saying. This part, they're not lying to you about the fact that the war between England and America, right, the so-called Revolutionary War, a lot of it was fought over keeping slaves. That's why a lot of the persons who are your founding fathers who sat down at the table, even the ones that passed for white, they're slave owners. These are slave owners. I know you were taught about them being historical, heroic figures and stuff like that. No, when they sat down, they sat around that table. These are slave owners. The one who said, "Give me liberty or give me death," right? Fighting for slavery. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Slave owner. The one who repeated it, Abraham Lincoln, slave owner. Right? We went through these presidents and stuff already, right? But just note, keep that in mind. All right. So they said, hold on, where we ought to be totally dissolved. I hope I'm not repeating myself. I don't think so. In pursuance of the Declaration of Independence, each of the 13 states proceeded to exercise its separate sovereignty, adopted for itself a constitution, and appointed officers for the administration of government in all its departments. Right? So they're saying all these states became countries. These countries decided to go ahead and have a partnership, right? Right? They got separate sovereignty. So every state is a sovereign nation, right? That they adopted for themselves a constitution, right? So each state actually had adopted a constitution and appointed officers for the administration of government in all its departments. By state, they did that. Legislative, executive, and judicial, right? Now they're starting to get into even how it compares to the, all of them coming together, but they're still separate sovereign states, right? For the purposes of defense, they united. So we didn't come together because of all this, whatever you're talking about. We came together because we need to defend ourselves against those that were trying to take away our rights to have slaves. They united their arms and their councils, and in 1778 they entered into a league known as the Articles of Confederation, right? Just like there's a League of Nations, the League of Articles of Confederation. They're telling you got to think about the Articles of Confederation like a league. This is not one nation. These are many nations that use this to make sure that they can defend themselves. All right? Whereby they agreed to entrust the administration of their external relations to a common agent known as the Congress of the United States, expressly declaring in the first article that each state retains its sovereignty, freedom and independence in every power, jurisdiction, and right which is not by this confederation expressly delegated to the United States and Congress assembled. Under this confederation, the War of the Revolution was carried on, and on the 3rd of September, 1783, the contest ended, and a definite treaty was signed by Great Britain in which she acknowledged the independence of the colonies. So they're saying, so we already had said each colony was a sovereign state. So Britain finally said, okay, you guys are independent. You're no longer our colonies. So whatever you call yourself, you call yourself. They're saying, so we as a country, right? Not we as a federal union. If you notice, they've been using those terms, right? Federal Union is a United States corporation. But the countries, right, are sovereign states. The estates, the sovereign countries, the sovereign states are the ones who fought for their freedom, right? And at that time, North Carolina and South Carolina would have actually been one sovereign nation, by the way. They would have been one state, all right? But anyways, so the following colonies, right? His Britannic Majesty now acknowledges and said the United States is, New Hampshire, Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island, Providence Plantations, Providence Plantations. Don't miss that. Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia to be free, sovereign, and independent states, that he treats them with as such, and for himself, his heirs, and successors, relinquishes all claims to the government, propriety and territorial rights of the same and every part thereof. Thus, there were established the two great principles asserted by the colonies, namely, the right of a state to govern itself and the right of a people to abolish a government when it comes to becomes destructive for the ends. Okay, so basically, if you see, I mean, pretty much at this thing, we're kind of becoming hyper repetitive, especially for the purposes of teaching today. But basically, let me just fast forward a little bit, and then we'll go on to the next state. All right, and who are we? What state are we in right now? South Carolina. All right. So let's finish up real quick. Oh, now I messed up. I think I lost where it was. What I was looking for. hmm So they've already told you about slavery, but they still won't mention it by name. But if that's why you have to know law. Hold on one second. I'm trying to find where I just left off. I apologize. I might have lost it. I think you guys get the point with South Carolina, though, right? I think we get the point. Okay, here we go. All right. This is what I was looking for. Just a couple more paragraphs, but then we're going to move on. Okay, you ready? Watch this. It says, in the present case, the fact is established with certainty. We assert, I'm sorry, let me move back one. We hold that the government thus established is subject to the two great principles asserted in the Declaration of Independence, and we hold further that the mode of its formation subjects it to a third fundamental principle, namely the law of compact. Right? We maintain that in every compact between two or more parties, the obligation is mutual, that the failure of one of the contracting parties to perform a material part of the agreement entirely releases the obligations of the other, and that where no arbiter is provided, each party is remitted to his own judgment to determine the fact of failure with all its consequences. In other words, right, you guys have decided you're not going to defend our right to have slaves. If you're not going to defend our right to have slaves, we out. We about to bounce. In the present case, that fact is established with certainty. We assert that 14 of the states have deliberately refused for years past to fulfill their constitutional obligations, and we refer to their own statutes for the proof. The Constitution of the United States, in the fourth article, provides as follows: no person held to service or labor in one state under the laws thereof, escaping into another, shall, in consequence of any law or regulation therein, be discharged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered up on claim of the party to whom such service or labor may be due. This stipulation was so material to the compact, right, us coming together as a nation, it was so material as us coming together, rather, as a federal union, that without it, that compact would have not been made. The greater number of the contracting parties held slaves, and they had previously evinced their estimate of the value of such stipulation by making it a condition in the ordinance for the government of the territory ceded by Virginia. Right? The territory what ceded by Virginia? The territory what? So we talking about we're talking about at this point what DC, right? Which now composes as the states. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, I was on the wrong part. My bad. Sorry. They're talking about Ohio, the stuff in the Ohio River. Well, no. Well, anyways, sorry. I'm in the wrong. I'm a little east of where I should be. Sorry. But anyways, long story short, without us keeping going over and over and over all that stuff, we're basically getting to a place to where we see clearly. Okay, they're saying here, look, when we came together as a compact federal union, we as a sovereign state thought that you were going to keep up chattel slavery. If you didn't keep up chattel slavery, y'all should have known that we weren't going to stick around. Since you decided to go ahead and get rid of chattel slavery, we won't even make sure we have an arbiter that we both can go ahead and say we trust. Well, we might as well just break up. You do you, we'll do us. All right. So far, Georgia has said they're fighting for slaves. So far, we just read Mississippi saying how they're fighting for slaves. We just read how South Carolina said they're fighting for slaves. What about Texas, who seceded from Mexico to keep slaves, even though they weren't even Mexican, right? And then they became an independent place, and now they're saying we're going to become part of the Confederacy, and we're going to do something. This is what Texas said. Texas, a declaration of the causes which impel the state of Texas to secede from the federal union. The government of the United States, by certain joint resolutions bearing the date of the first day of March of the year of AD 1845, proposed to the Republic of Texas, then a free, sovereign, and independent nation, because they had just seceded from, they had seceded from Mexico. Emphasis in the original, the annexation of the latter to the former, as one of the co-equal states thereof. In other words, you guys asked us to be a state. We came in to be a state. The people of Texas, by deputies and convention assembled on the 4th day of July of the same year, assented and accepted. So they became part of the Union. All right. Texas abandoned her separate national existence and consented to become one of the Confederated Union to promote her welfare. Right. So to make sure Texas was able to bankroll what they needed to and take care of their people, that's why they came in. Ensure domestic tranquility. You see that same language being used, and secure more substantially the blessings of peace and liberty to her people. Same language, right? Now watch this. She was received into the Confederacy with her own constitution. So once again, still a sovereign state, but the Union. They're going to be unionized, right? Under the guarantee of the federal constitution and of the compact of annexation, that she should enjoy these blessings. She was received as a commonwealth holding. So it wasn't even received really as a state. Right? Remember, there's commonwealths, there's states. Commonwealth is a kingdom. So she was received as a commonwealth holder, maintaining and protecting the institution known as Negro slavery. Boom. We didn't even have to go that far with this one, too. Right? Came in as a commonwealth holder. We had just fought against Mexico. We finally took power over Mexico. Now that we are no longer part of Mexico, we weren't part of you guys came to us and said, hey, we'd like for you guys to become part of what we're doing. We said, we thought about it, July 4th, right? We said, you know what? Yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. Just make sure that you recognize our sovereignty, that we have sovereign rule and law. We'll do what we can with the union, but make sure it's the union. We're coming to you to help us to protect our people and our rights and our chattel slave owners. As long as you keep that up, we're cool. Right? She was received as a commonwealth holding, maintaining and protecting the institution known as Negro slavery. The servitude of the African to the white race within her limits, a relation that had existed from the first settlement of her wilderness by the white race, and which her people intended should exist in all future time. If you were a person who's in Texas, they're saying that from the first time a so-called white man made his way to Texas, that basically they made slaves, or they even came possibly with slaves. And from that point on, everybody who is considered to be black is subservient unto them. And this was something that any white man who becomes a Texas man, he comprehends this, that this is not only supposed to be there at that moment in time, but should exist forever. That's what they just said. Not Kofi. Texas. Right? Texas said. Matter of fact, said her institutions and geographical position established the strongest ties between her and other slave-holding states of the Confederacy. Those ties have been strengthened by association, but what has been the course of the government of the United States and of the people and the authorities of non-slaving holding states since our connection to them? The controlling majority of the federal government, right? This is like basically saying, the Republicans now had a majority. Right? The controlling majority of the federal government, under various pretenses and disguises, has so administered the same as to exclude the citizens of the southern states, unless under odious and unconstitutional restrictions, from all the immense territory owned in common by all the states on the Pacific Ocean, for the avowed purpose of acquiring sufficient power in the common government to use it as a means by destroying institutions of Texas and her sister slaveholding states. In other words, from sea to shining sea, Manifest Destiny says we're supposed to take over. We believe we are doing that through the white man's burden. We believe we have every right through doctrine of discovery. We believe we have every right by this lost cause rhetoric, right, that's going to pop up. We have all this stuff. We believe that that's what we're fighting for, right? We're fighting to make sure that as far as from sea to shining sea, we can own slaves. All right, let's go to the last one real quick. Virginia, we're running out of time. We go a little bit longer on Sundays. Usually we end at 11 a.m. New York time. We go a little bit longer. I won't keep you no more than like 15 to 20 more minutes. I promise. Right? Because the main thing we're dealing with, the lost cause, those of you, if you don't know about the Daughters of Confederacy, we'll talk a little bit about them, but, feel free, to look at all this stuff or whatever. But the main thing I'm trying to show you is the lost cause rhetoric starts with, nobody seceded from the Union because of keeping slavery. They seceded from the Union because they're just trying to make sure that they keep states' rights. All right, states' rights to what? Now, here's Virginia. Virginia is where Richmond is. Richmond is the capital of the Confederacy. Is that correct? Right? You learned that in school? Richmond, Virginia is the capital of the Confederacy. And how you doing, babe? My wife is on the Honorable Mind. As always, check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish. Not A-N-D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She's a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. Let's see what Virginia has to say. That will be done for today. Right? Let's see what Virginia has to say, and it will be done for today. All right. The Secession Ordinance. An ordinance to repeal the ratification of the Constitution of the United States of America by the state of Virginia and to resume all the rights and powers granted under said Constitution. So they said they're leaving the federal union as a sovereign state because the federal union is not giving them what the Constitution said. Once again, what does the Constitution say? What are all these states saying? Constitution saying that chattel slavery is what you fight for. All right, here we go. The people of Virginia, in their ratification of the Constitution of the United States of America, adopted by them in convention on the 25th day of June in the year of our Lord 1788, and having declared that the powers granted under the said Constitution were derived from the people of the United States and might be resumed whensoever the same should be perverted to their injury and oppression. And the federal government, having perverted said powers, not only to the injury of the people of Virginia, but to the oppression of the southern slaveholding states. In other words, we always came into this with the mindset that we are fighting tyrants who are trying to come against our rights. And if you guys ever come against our rights, we always had the mindset that we would leave you guys and fight for our freedom, especially when it comes to holding slaves. Now, therefore, we, the people of Virginia, do declare and ordain that the ordinance adopted by the people of this state in convention on the 25th day of June, 88, whereby the Constitution of the United States of America was ratified, and all acts of the General Assembly of this state ratifying or adopting amendments to said Constitution are hereby repealed and abrogated, that the union between the state of Virginia and the other states under the Constitution aforesaid is hereby dissolved, and that state of Virginia is in the full possession and exercise of all rights of sovereignty which belong and appertain to a free and independent state. And they do further declare that the said Constitution of the United States of America is no longer binding on any of the citizens of this state. This ordinance shall take effect and be in act this day when ratified by a majority of the votes of the people of this state, cast at a poll to be taken thereon on the fourth Thursday in May next, in pursuance of a schedule to be hereafter enacted, done in convention in the city of Richmond on the 17th day of April in the year of our Lord 1861, and in the 85th year of the Commonwealth of Virginia. All right, that's the whole thing for them. They have the shortest one by far. So basically, what did they say? We came into this fighting against England. England was going to ultimately take away our slaves. We wanted to make sure that we fought for sovereignty and not just be a colony under them and be a sovereign state. We came into this thinking the Federal Union would protect us. You as the Federal Union did not protect our right to have slaves. So therefore, since you did that, we take our right to be fully independent even from your union, to remain as a sovereign state. And as a sovereign state, anybody that's a citizen of ours or rocks with us in Virginia, you got to be fully into chattel slavery and nothing else. How you doing, Sister Tia? Right? And yes, Sister Vivian, we have these things recorded, Facebook, YouTube, and you can always, matter of fact, we're about to do something called a shout out in a second. So if you stick around for the shout out, you should be able to get some more information if you like. Like I said, we'll be finished now, like no more than like 10 to 14-ish minutes. So yeah. So in what we're seeing, we see very clearly anybody who tries to tell us And I'm sorry, Shabbat Shalom. I'm sorry, Shan Shalom, Sister Michelle. Hopefully all is well. So in this, we can see very clearly. Anybody trying to teach you and I that chattel slavery wasn't real, or chattel slavery wasn't the real reason that persons were fighting, they're lying, right? Those of you who've been doing the watch party with us for Birth of a Nation, we invite you to join us on Saturdays when we do it, right? If they're telling you that it wasn't, they didn't literally in 1915 harken back to the fact that we need to fight the South shall rise again. It's a lie. Now here's one of the biggest things about the lie and all that, right? We gave all this information, everything. Now here's some of the light work. Here's some of the low-hanging fruit, but you should also, you know, if you are not aware of this, you must know this as well before you leave, right? Now study all this to show yourself approved. Don't just go off it because I said it, right? I read what somebody else told you. Maybe they're lying about what they said, what their position is, right? But they're the persons who wrote it. They're the persons who seceded. That being said, when you get into this position, I want you to recognize that even this whole thing of statues, you know how persons say, why are you guys pulling down statues of this? Why we always got to pull down a statue of this person and that person? That was a big deal recently, right? All of those statues, just about, all of those statues that you see being pulled down, none of them even were around during the Civil War. Did you know that? Now somebody say, well, yeah, duh, it takes time. Okay, well, almost none of those statues were around during Reconstruction. Not until the Daughters of Confederacy. You may or may not be aware of that, but that's a truth that you need to know. That these statues that everybody's saying, you know, this is our culture and they had this up, and why would you take down well, my great great grandmama, your great great grandmama didn't see those statues because they didn't exist. And if they did, they were only put up to tell a lie. So this is how this part goes. If you're not aware of this, I got to be real quick with this. I don't want to hold y'all forever. And today, it is family day for me as well, and we got to check on some of our ministerial staff, some things. So you know, I got a few things to do real quick today. But so there's a group called the Daughters of Confederacy. When you get a chance, right? I believe is it Daughters of Confederacy or it's something else? What's their acronym? Hold on, Daughters of Confederacy. Or am I saying it wrong? Sorry, it's the UDC, the United Daughters of Confederacy, affectionately known as the Daughters of Confederacy. Right? It is the United Daughters of Confederacy. All praise to the Most High for revealing even more truth. So they're United Daughters of Confederacy. And what you may not recognize is it's considered to be a hereditary group. What does hereditary mean? It means persons that are in the family, right? And this group was founded, this organization was founded in 1894. 1894. Civil War ends, right? 1865. They're, so what were we dealing with? 75, 85, 95 would be 30. So 29 years later, this group is founded, which means that what we're about to talk about with them did not happen during the Civil War, and it did not happen right during Reconstruction, right after the Civil War. Okay? Even this is a lie that needs to be addressed. Right? How you doing, Mo Desire? Yeah, these are, so they are hereditary. Now, who are they hereditary of? The United Daughters of Confederacy, they are the daughters or the family members, right, of at least the ones who start the organization. They are the family members of those who lost in the South. How you doing, Charlie Thomas? Thanks for being part of the community, or Charlie, said the full name, right? So their parents, or their uncles, or their big brothers, or whatever. Some of them lived through the Civil War. Some of them did not, right? But these United Daughters of the Confederacy, the UDC, or the Daughters of the Confederacy, also known as that, they come together, and they actually begin to try to. Some of them maybe even believing some of the myths are true, but really all the stuff that you hear, they are the reason why it's been changed up. They're the main protagonists, right? They actually are persons who grew up rich, South owning, Southland owning slaves. And I know the thought process, they even did this in the movie we were doing on the watch party for Birth of a Nation. They want you to believe that everybody sold everything that they had. It's 11:11, by the way. They sold everything that they had, and that they, they didn't, they didn't have anything. Everybody ended up broke. That is not true. at all. It's 11:11. That is not true. Right? That is not the truth. It is not true that everybody just got dirt poor. But even after that, there's a lot of stuff that came, money that was raised. Even some of them did a lot of different things to be able to help their communities and stuff. And so women, as normally happens in a lot of communities, they don't get credit for. Women are the background of a lot of this stuff that changes and turns and growth and family environments and things of that nature, right? You wouldn't have Mother's Day if it wasn't for a woman. You wouldn't have Christmas be celebrated the way it was if it wasn't for a woman. You wouldn't have that A word that runs with extortion if it wasn't for women. You know, there's positive things, negative things, right? But women on both sides of the fence are usually going to be more, more foundational than what we like to believe. That being said, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, they begin to give a myth, right? Like, what if we didn't really lose, or what if we didn't really lose because our cause is just, right? So, for example, many of you think that even though he did have a problem with drunkenness and he did go broke, a lot of you think that President Ulysses S. Grant, who was a general, right, who was over all the U.S. troops and defeated General Lee and all that officially, and they met at Appomattox and all that. A lot of you believe that General Ulysses S. Grant was just this drunk that everybody hated, and he was never really of any value and nobody respected him. But you actually discover that persons actually respected him a lot, especially in the South. And a lot of them wrote letters to him and would meet him and would shake his hand and say, man, I thank you for actually like treating us with respect, even though we lost, and not like treating us another way. And it could have been real easy, but and having a lot of respect for him. He was known as a very smart, intelligent general. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he becomes known as a stupid general. That's not because that's what actually happened. That's because of the Daughters of Confederacy, the UDC, United Daughters of Confederacy, doing what they did, right? And changing up history, right? Or how you'll hear like, oh yeah, we never fought for states' rights. All these persons said they fought for states' rights, but then Jefferson Davis and others at the behest, right, and the paying even of the United Daughters of Confederacy, all of a sudden they changed their tune and they start saying, oh yeah, we never fought for chattel slavery. It was always for states' rights, right? They even start to change the curriculum. Yes, they even start to go into the schools and they say these are the books you will use, and they start to hire the teachers, and if they find that there's a teacher they didn't hire, they look into it, and if you weren't what they wanted, they start to say no, you can't teach, right? And then all of a sudden you get to a place to where, oh yeah, we're God-fearing, church-going women, and God wanted us to have slavery. Our parents wanted this. They preached it in the pulpits and things, and they began, as we were talking about with the statues, they began to build the statues, right? Many of them, right? Even though they had a little bit of money going on, they started raising a lot of money and became very rich. Still are very rich. They still exist. They still exist, right? In many different ways, but they still exist. That being said, they would come together, and when they would come together and grow and use their money, they would use their money to put up a bunch of statues, so that everywhere they went, right? So that everywhere they went, every single place that they went, you would be, or everywhere place you went, you would see Stonewall Jackson, right? You would see General Lee. You would see, even a lot of persons don't know now. This is not necessarily theirs, but a lot of persons don't even know. Like Mount Rushmore, right, is built by the same person who has the same beliefs, right, about black persons as the ones who built the stuff on Stonewall Mountain, right? He was supposed to do the same thing in Stonewall Mountain, and was supposed to actually do way more with Mount Rushmore, but they ran out of money, especially during the Depression. But the German guy who built those things was somebody who agreed with what was going on with eugenics and the Daughters of Confederacy, right? So this is what they provided. So persons who are still speaking and teaching and doing a lot of stuff today, they don't even know that they're actually reading stuff and looking at things that were changed up by the Daughters of Confederacy. If you go back before 1894, and even really before 1900, just look at what's actually written, what we actually see, what persons said out of their mouths. Some persons are recorded speaking about their experiences and telling you. Yes, we have actual audio recordings of persons from the 1800s speaking on why they fought for chattel slavery. It's not even like, you know, a person will be like, man, you know, well, who? How can you trust it? No, we have literal recordings of the person, even audio record. We have audio recordings, we have books, we have letters, we have all this stuff. We have things in museums, everything. But the lost cause is designed to tell you that it was never a fight about enslaving the Negro. It was a fight about states' rights. And this is why you have a lot of Negroes that are running around and wave that rebel flag too. Here's another thing that's a lie, and we got to get ready to take our leave pretty much after this one. Here's another thing just for you to do some research on. That so-called Confederate flag that you see pop out, and those statues that they put up, by the way, they put up statues real quick, and those statues were cheap. And that's why when you pull a lot of them down, they break because they're not really made well. If you notice, a lot of statues, when they come down, they break into pieces because the Daughters of Confederacy were just throwing out money. Those flags, those statues, and even hangings, yes, right, from the noose. The hanging of our people, there was more of that that happened way after chattel slavery and way after the Civil War than happened during or before. Meaning that whenever you see that flag come out, it came out during Reconstruction for the KKK to start doing their thing, right? At the end of the 1800s, you see a bunch of statues start popping up, right? Not as many then because Daughters of Confederacy aren't really taking off, but you see a few statues getting popped up, and you'll also see a whole bunch of hangings happen. When you get to Jim Crow, Daughters of Confederacy have been going for a while. You see a whole bunch of statues pop up. You see that flag pop up. You see a whole bunch of hangings during Jim Crow. All of a sudden things go away for a little bit because everything's controlled. When things start getting under control, you need to manipulate. The poor start catching on. What do? You again? You cause confusion. You have that rebel flag come out again, right? Daughters of Confederacy are there to help. You have certain material that you're teaching and stuff. You make sure that you say the South should rise again. You say that it was a lost cause. You cause persons to be split up on both sides. Now, at this time, by the 50s and 60s, you're having a party switch to where the Democrats are becoming Republicans, Republicans are becoming Democrats. Back then, they called them Dixiecrats before, right? Dixiecrats you had to be careful of. Those were the persons who were upholding the South and everything. That's why there's still that undertone of that in the Democratic Party always, right? You know, so you see all these things happen, and guess what you're going to see? You're going to see those statues pop up again. And what else are you going to see? You're going to see hangings. And my brother and sister, I know somebody doesn't want to admit this to you, but guess what? You've seen recently too, right? A little before the tiki torches, but by the time we get to the tiki torches, it should be something that we see very plainly. You've seen UDC pop up again in many different ways. Women that are making sure that they're upholding the righteous, pious attitudes of their fathers and stuff, right? You're seeing money being spent in certain ways to make sure that you do certain things to change, eradicate, and erase history. You're doing, you're seeing, um, you're seeing the rebel flag all over the place, right? You're hearing this rhetoric that, hey, we don't fight for slaves. We've never been about slaves. It's about states' rights. We're not against black folk. We're not doing this. They're just coming against us. It's not about It's not about colored persons. ICE is not here for colored persons. It's about protecting the states. It's about protecting the rights of the people, right? I mean, sure, we're saying that those Haitians and everybody, they're eating pets and they're eating people, but you know, like you know, those Caribbean folk, they're doing those things. But we're it's really more so. We said those things, but really it's about protecting the people, their rights, the states' rights, the United States' rights, the so-called white man's rights. This is We're seeing the same thing, and guess what you're seeing as well? That rebel flag. You're seeing money being spent in certain places. You're seeing the eradication of things as far as education. You're seeing the changing of history. You're seeing why persons even tell you history doesn't matter. And then mess around on top of that. What are you going to see as well? You're going to see hangings. Mm-hmm. Have there been any hangings? Has there been an increase? Have we seen more hangings in a while than we've seen in a while? Old women in their 80s somehow pulling themselves up on strings and hanging themselves there, somehow tying themselves off and hanging themselves by trees. We had a repeat of Emmett Till recently, right? Swollen face and all. And you're also seeing statues or persons fighting, saying, we need to put these statues back up. We need to defend them. We need to make new statues. We need to make sure that we have statues where we can go and look at it. We're seeing this stuff right in front of us. Yeah, that SS symbolism. Yeah, for sure. So these things are there for us to see that these are lies that are there. And so now we have Yah's word and we have ways of doing stuff. And by the way, we have the infrastructure. We keep saying we have so many different ways we can start working with and working for and helping out each other and stuff. At this point, it's almost exhaustive to say let's exhaust what we have. Right? At this point, how do we come out of it? You know, the world is the system. That's part of it. That wicked system. Anybody who supports it of any color, because some of our people are the worst perpetrators in that. Anybody who supports that system, we gotta let them go. Right? We gotta do what's righteous. Anybody who keeps trying to support, like we know what this is at this point. If you're not aware of it, fine, right? This is what the teachings are for. But at this point, Holy Spirit has given this to us in so many different ways. But it's also time for us to come out. It's time for us to unite, right? It's time for us. Persons say that they have black fatigue. That's the new thing. Some persons now reverse it. I got white fatigue. I'm just being honest. I got sin fatigue. It gives me headaches. Keeps me up at night. I'm being honest. I got sin fatigue. I'm done. I'm done with trying. Like the Bible doesn't tell us to defend or to forgive racism, white supremacy, or to forgive chauvinism, or to forgive male chauvinism, or to forgive misogyny, or to forgive misandry, or to forgive whatever it is that you're fighting against that sin. It tells us to forgive the person, but that doesn't mean that I support you either, right? I have to put a line in the sand, and at some point, if we really begin to do that, like I said, persons recognize that this can be. You said, how can what be? How can what be that you forgive? You can forgive a person, but not forgive racism. Racism is a system. You can't forgive a system, right? RAC, first part of the word ISM, second part, that suffix, it makes it a system, right? What I'm saying is this. Once again, forgiveness is not even just for the person. Forgiveness is for you as well, right? So when people be like, "I'll never forgive Abraham Lincoln," so what, you gonna walk around angry at Abraham Lincoln and have heart attacks and stuff because you can't forgive somebody you never met? Okay, fine. I release you, Abraham Lincoln. Right? I release you, Thomas Jefferson. These are town destroyers for Native Americans as well, right? I release you, Andrew Jackson. I release you, whomever your person is. Some of y'all not just racist persons or presidents. Some of y'all need to, forgive yourself. Some of you need to forgive your partner, your spouse. Some of you need to forgive your child. Some of you need to forgive your parent. But I can forgive Margaret Sanger and just say, hey, I release you, but not forgive the system, right? I'm not called to forgive systems. I'm called to forgive and release persons. You said you've done nothing to be guilty about? Okay. You've done nothing. You've never sinned. You've never fallen short. You've never made a mistake. Okay, cool. As far as biblically speaking, that makes you a liar because all have sinned and fallen short. And also, right? And if in First John, right, says that if we say that we have not sinned or whatever, then we make Christ a liar. Or at least we try to make him a liar, and the truth is not in us, right? So all of us have sinned. Now, if you're saying you didn't create racism, okay, what does that have to do with being in a racist society? You see what I'm saying? Like you're having you're trying your best to defend something, and it's kind of crazy. Like, you see what I'm saying? Is it like, or if you're talking about the opposite end, I didn't do anything to them. They did something to me. Okay, so watch this. If somebody lies on me, I can be like, okay, bro, man, whatever. I forgive you and release it and not carry it on me. But it doesn't mean I have to like do business with them or be buddy buddy with that person. If that's what you're talking about, it's the same thing. But once you see what I'm saying, I'm not here to try and get you to be where you're whole every day. Look, if racism's still around you, see it, but don't. Right? And if racism's around you, call it out. If somebody around you is racist or does something racist, and you say something, and they actually, get themselves together, that's great. If they don't get themselves together, cool. You let me know who you are. I don't have to be around you, but I'm not gonna carry you around. I'm not gonna be sitting up there trying to lay in the bed with my beautiful wife, and I'm sitting up there, some dude who I've never met before is gonna be in my mind rent free. No, pause. Right? Pause. Like I'm not even gonna allow that. Like, no, let them Let them do that, right? As much as see, if we talking about biblically, now this is going to another place, but if we talking about biblically, sin is going to exist till Christ come back. That's why you got to separate. I separate from it. I forgive you, but I separate from what you're doing. If you try to bring your sin, if you try to bring, your foolishness, if you try to bring sexual depravity around me, right? Then you just gonna stay away. You said judge their own actions? Sure. Right. So I can forgive the person and still see that your action was crazy. All right, watch this. Watch this. Make this real quick and real brief because I really do have to go. Right? As much as you're trying your best to do this weird thing where it's like judge everybody according to their own actions. Yeah, nobody said you shouldn't. That's the thing that you have to where you're trying to cape up for somebody so bad. You're trying to defend somebody so bad that you're not even looking at their actions that we talked about today. The actions that I just talked about today, and maybe you just came on for 5 seconds or so, which means that if we've been on for 3 hours plus, you have no clue what I'm talking about. So you might want to actually go back and revisit it. We have it recorded. If you actually care to find out what I'm talking about, doesn't seem like that's the case, right? It seems like you're just on this hill you're going to die on that's actually making you look apologetically very unsound, right? So I'm trying to give you a little bit of bail to help you. You just don't want it, right? But that being said, um, I've focused today on the fact that we have clear evidence from South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Virginia, and Texas that those states specifically said they left the Union because they were under the impression that the Union was supposed to support their right to make sure that they had slaves. And when the Union would not do so, they as sovereign states left and decided to make a confederacy and make some other type of union. That's what they fought for, right? That's what they fought for. If you would defend that, this is where we're gonna turn it now, right? This is how it works. So those states and the persons who wrote that, I can forgive them and say, man, shoot, whatever. I release you that, and I released, you know, I will not hold that on me, right? I will not hold that on me, and we'll let Yah do the judging. He ultimately is the one that's going to forgive anyway. So forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Cool. Yeah, I need you to forgive me of some stuff that I've done that's crazy. So I release them so you can release me. If they haven't released, if they haven't changed and anything, you can judge their hearts. I'm cool with that. That's one part. Here's the other side though. If you would come along after that and say that, hey, even though they said that they fought and prayed about and fostered a relationship with the Most High and said their founding fathers and said they built a whole country and a whole community and all this stuff based off of chattel slavery, and that's what they were trying to defend, that's what they fight for, and then somebody came behind that with a lost cause rhetoric to be able to continue that and say, hey, we need to fight for manifest destiny, white man's burden, doctrine of discovery, lost cause, Darwinistic evolution, right, which is systemic racism, which is literally scientific racism through eugenics, his cousin Galton, right, things that are written in an IQ test, all these different things or whatever, redline. And if you'll say, no, we should make sure that we defend that system, then you're having a different conversation than I can forgive the person for what they've done and still say that I will not allow those actions to continue in my life or in the lives of my people or in the lives of my family, right? But I will not have somebody tell me that I'm wrong for saying, hey, you did wrong. If I forgive you, it's because you've done something wrong. If you are convicted of something, somebody speaks something to you, say, I was convicted of that or convicted by that. It means you broke a law. You broke the law, right? So if somebody did wrong, if I do wrong, and I ask you for forgiveness, it's because I recognize that I could be better. But if your mindset is, I'm going to pretend that nobody did wrong so that I'll feel better, well, then guess what? You are a liar and the truth is not in you. And if you're going to say that you have never done anything wrong, which was your initial statement, right? Now, I don't think you meant it that way. That's why I corrected you. But if you say you haven't done anything wrong, then you're in a position to where you don't even know what forgiveness, empathy, and all this is. And therefore, this isn't for you. Right? I'm not here to say that every white person is guilty of blah, blah. If you want to carry that, that's on you. You got to ask yourself why that's the first place you go. Right? You got to ask yourself why that's the first place you go. If I say we should forgive, and your first thing is to be like, forgive what? And especially now, I don't know if this is, you could just have somebody else's picture up, but let's say your picture is actually representative of who you are. If you, I'm just, okay, Holy Spirit. I don't know if I should say this or not. I kind of know how this is going to be taken, or maybe I don't. I'm just going to be obedient to the word. I see what picture is up there. May not be your picture, right? Because a lot of persons who troll, they try to put other things up there. But let's do this. If your picture is even representative of who you are, right, as a so-called black man or whatever, and you think that your first responsibility is to say that, hey, persons who hate and despise me, I should make, like, let's make sure that we take it on a case-by-case basis. All right, I agree with you. But if that's your first place to go, rather than be like, yeah, okay, if somebody hates me and despises me, I probably should look at them a certain way. I'm just being honest. What does that say about you? That you would make sure that the person I'm talking about is going to be more protected than me, the person who's trying to say that you should protect you and you should protect your family and you should protect anybody of any color who's willing to die, whether they be John Brown or whether they be Malcolm X or whether they be anybody in between. I'm just saying, I'm gonna look at you a certain way when you start doing that. When you're doing that dancing, that's a little the moves is kind of smooth, bro. If that's not who you are, and you got somebody else's face up, then you just got black face up anyways, and it proves who you are anyways. All right, done for real. Thank y'all. Love you so much. I hope I didn't bring it down too much. I hope this series been. This series has kind of been like, when you dealing with lies over and over and over again. I know this hasn't been like the uplifting, get yourself together and do this, and the Lord said, and all that. I know this hasn't been this type of thing. But prayerfully, this has been like barak. Prayerfully, it's blessed you, so to speak. It's barak. It's uplifting you. It's encouraging, in a sense. If we're gonna go into the muck, we got to go into the muck. We're not ending until December 25th. So, right, December 25th will be the last official day where we deal with that lie called Christmas. So I'm just letting you know, if we're gonna reverse the curse, like we said, we're gonna revisit the lies. We got to bring them out, and these lies are they're doozies, right? So we're gonna go ahead and do what we do. I thank you all. I appreciate you. Much love to everybody. Keep us in prayer. We shall keep you in prayer as well. Try to stay warm out here. I know it's a lot of persons got hit with snow in a lot of different places, especially in the Northeast. So be careful. Shovel the walkways, do all that stuff. Get your salt if you can, and try to stay warm. We're going to get ready to do our shout out. If you've never done a shout out with us before, just stick around for a second. You have to come over to TikTok. By the way, thank you for being on all platforms, whether you joined us from the podcast, you came over from IG, you're on Clapper, or YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. We appreciate you all. Thank you so much for joining us again. And we're excited about what the Most High is doing and how he's bringing us back into remembrance of him and his law, his people, and what we should be doing as a people. Tomorrow we will have early rising Bible study session 6:30 a.m. New York time. So please, man, please, sir, if you can join us for that. We appreciate you. You should get the email if we have your information and everything. You should get the email invite as usual. Let's see. And tomorrow we'll have our live sessions in the rising, and we'll have in the evening. In the evening, we're going to start a new series on Galatians. So join us for that. We'll start at Galatians chapter 1, verse 1 tomorrow, and then in the evening we'll have our project management meeting that we normally have on Mondays for those who want to do some behind the scenes stuff and are going to be laborers to help us out with the harvest that is plenteous. So thank you all. I appreciate you. Don't forget again, next week is going to be kind of crucial. Wednesday night with Elder Tamara, 8:30 p.m. New York time. Thursday Rising Prayer with Elder Anais. On Thursday, 7 a.m. New York time. We're going to have women's meeting Friday evening, 7 p.m. New York time. Watch party, 15 p.m. New York time on Saturday. Men's meeting, 7 p.m. New York time on Saturday. A lot of stuff coming up. So we hope to see you. But once again, if you'd like to be part of the shout out, come over to TikTok and join us. But to all on all different platforms, thank you so much. If you guys want to be part of the shout out, once again, just stick around for a second. We'll show you how it works. And prayerfully you'll enjoy it. And if you want to come over and join us on TikTok, feel free to. But to everybody, thank you so much. We give our honor and praise to the Most High. We give our praise and honor to Him for my wife, the Honorable Maya, who lives a life that is able to be honored. As always, you can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish. Not A-N-D, the letter N. Bloom and Flourish. She's a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. Much love and respect to everybody. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of the day. And we're going to go ahead and take our leave. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We honor you. We look forward to talking to you guys very soon. And hopefully you enjoyed. And as always, remember, beloved, that you are loved. You're necessary. You're majestic. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. And you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in the system no longer have to be of it. Take care. Peace be upon you. We'll talk to you soon.